I married a man who wanted to destroy me, and he had no idea I knew. Elena Mercer stood at the altar in a dress worth more than most people's cars, about to marry a lie. 5 minutes earlier, she'd heard every word through that half-open door. The gambling debts, the scheme, the exit plan. Her groom wasn't just using her. He was weaponizing their marriage to save himself and ruin her family. But Gavin Sterling made one fatal mistake. He underestimated the woman holding the bouquet. This is the story of how a bride became a hunter and a wedding became a trap. If you're watching, drop a comment with your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stay until the end, because this revenge? It's just getting started. The morning of Elena Mercer's wedding day began like a fairy tale and ended like a crime scene, though no one would know that until much later. She woke at dawn in her childhood bedroom, the same pale yellow walls she'd stared at through chickenpox and heartbreak and college acceptance letters. Her mother was already downstairs coordinating with the catering team, her voice bright and commanding in that particular way mothers have when they're orchestrating the happiest day of their daughter's life. The house smelled like lilies and coffee and the expensive perfume her bridesmaids had been spritzing since 6 a.m. Elena sat at her vanity while the makeup artist worked, transforming her face into something luminous and perfect. The woman, Candace, mid-50s, chatty, kept up a steady stream of conversation about other weddings she'd done, celebrity looks she'd recreated, the weather forecast for the outdoor ceremony. Elena responded at all the right moments, smiled at all the right times, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. She was thinking about Gavin Sterling, with his sharp jawline and sharper suits, his easy charm and easier lies. They'd met 14 months ago at a charity gala her father's company had sponsored. She'd been standing near the silent auction tables, bored out of her mind, when he'd appeared beside her with 2 glasses of champagne and a smile that could melt steel. "I'm not supposed to tell you this," he'd said, leaning in like they were conspirators, "but I just bid an obscene amount of money on a weekend at a bed and breakfast in Vermont, and I have absolutely no interest in going to Vermont." She'd laughed despite herself. Then why bid on it? Because the woman running the auction looked so hopeful every time someone walked past it. I couldn't stand to see her disappointed. He'd handed her one of the champagne flutes. "I'm Gavin." "Elena, I know who you are." He'd said it warmly, not creepily. "Your father's speech earlier was impressive. The work your company does with sustainable manufacturing, it's the kind of thing that actually matters." And just like that, she'd been hooked. The courtship had been textbook perfect. Flowers delivered to her office with handwritten notes. Weekend trips to the coast. Dinners where he asked about her day and actually listened to the answers. He'd met her family and charmed them all. Her mother had actually used the word smitten, which Elena had teased her about for weeks. Her father, usually skeptical of anyone who showed interest in his only daughter, had warmed to Gavin after a single round of golf and a lengthy conversation about market trends. 6 months in, Gavin had proposed on the beach at sunset, and it had been so perfect it almost felt scripted, which Elena would later realize it absolutely was. "You're going to be the most beautiful bride," Candace said now, dusting something shimmery across Elena's cheekbones. "I can always tell when someone's genuinely happy. It shows in the skin." Elena's smile didn't waver. "Thank you." The ceremony was scheduled for 3 o'clock at the Belmont Estate, a sprawling property on the edge of the city with gardens that looked like they'd been imported from an English countryside painting. 200 guests, a string quartet, flowers everywhere. Her dress, custom-made, fitted 3 times, perfect, hung on the back of her closet door like a ghost of the future. By noon, the house was controlled chaos. Bridesmaids rushing around in matching robes, arguing about jewelry and shoes and whether the weather would hold. Mia, Elena's younger sister by 3 years, was the only calm presence in the storm. She appeared in Elena's doorway holding 2 bottles of water and a knowing look. "Drink," Mia ordered, pressing a bottle into Elena's hands. "You've been so busy smiling for everyone else, you forgot to hydrate." Elena took a long sip, grateful. Mia had always been the practical one, the law student who could find the loophole in any argument, the sister who knew when something was wrong even when no one else noticed. "You okay?" Mia asked quietly, closing the door behind her. "Why wouldn't I be?" Because you're getting married in 3 hours, and you haven't freaked out even once. It's suspicious. Elena managed a real laugh at that. Maybe I'm just ready. Or maybe you're in shock. Mia sat on the edge of the bed, studying her sister's face. It's okay to be nervous, you know. It's actually pretty normal. I'm not nervous. Then what are you? Elena opened her mouth to answer and found she didn't have words for it. Excited? Yes. Happy? She'd thought so, until recently. There had been small things, little inconsistencies that she'd brushed aside because she was in love and planning a wedding, and who had time to overanalyze every little detail? The way Gavin's phone was always face down, the calls he took in another room, the weekend business trip that got extended by 3 days with barely an explanation. The time she'd stopped by his apartment unannounced, and he'd seemed almost irritated to see her, though he'd covered it quickly with a kiss and an apology about being distracted by work. Little things. Probably nothing. I'm fine, Elena said finally, and Mia looked like she wanted to push harder, but their mother's voice called from downstairs, something about the florist and a ribbon emergency, and the moment dissolved. The next 2 hours blurred together, the drive to the venue in a limousine with her bridesmaids, all of them laughing and taking photos, the organized chaos of the bridal suite, where a coordinator with a clipboard directed traffic like a general commanding troops. The moment Elena stepped into her dress, and her mother's eyes filled with tears. You look like a dream, her mother whispered, adjusting the veil. Elena looked at herself in the mirror and saw a stranger. A beautiful stranger in white lace and silk, but a stranger nonetheless. She blinked the thought away. At 2:45, the coordinator gave the 15-minute warning. The bridesmaids filed out to take their places. Elena's father appeared in his tuxedo, looking handsome and proud, and a little misty-eyed. Ready, sweetheart? He asked, offering his arm. Almost, Elena said. I just need a minute. Pre-ceremony nerves. Her father kissed her forehead. Take your time. I'll be right outside. Alone in the bridal suite, Elena took a deep breath. The room was tucked in a corner of the estate's main building, separated from the groom's quarters by a long hallway and a set of French doors that led to the gardens. She could hear music starting outside, the soft swell of strings that meant guests were being seated. She picked up her bouquet, white roses and peonies tied with silk ribbon, and ran through her mental checklist one more time. Dress? Perfect. Hair? Perfect. Vows? Memorized? Future? Supposedly perfect. That's when she heard the voices, male voices, coming from somewhere close by. Laughing. The kind of laughter that came with drinks and camaraderie and the feeling that you were among friends who would keep your secrets. Elena moved toward the sound without quite meaning to. There was a door at the back of the bridal suite, a service door, mostly hidden behind a folding screen, probably meant for staff to move through the building without disturbing guests. It was cracked open about 2 inches. The voices were coming from the room beyond. Elena should have walked away, should have gone back to the mirror, checked her lipstick one more time, focused on the fact that in 15 minutes she'd be walking down an aisle toward the man she loved. Instead, she stepped closer to the door. Can't believe you're actually going through with it, a voice was saying. Male, youngish, tipsy. Elena recognized it. Aaron, one of Gavin's groomsmen. Why wouldn't I? That was Gavin. Elena's heart did a strange little flip at the sound of his voice, the way it always did. Because marriage is a trap, my friend. Beautiful, expensive trap. Laughter from multiple voices. Someone, probably Caleb, the best man, said, Aaron's just bitter because Sarah left him. Sarah was smart to leave, Aaron shot back, but he was laughing. Unlike our boy Gavin here, getting himself locked down. Locked down isn't the phrase I'd use. Though Gavin's voice had an edge to it now, something sharp underneath the humor. More like strategically positioned. A pause. Then Caleb, what's that supposed to mean? Elena's hand was on the doorframe. She wasn't breathing. Come on, Gavin said. You know exactly what it means. Enlighten us. This voice was new. Noah, another groomsman, usually quiet. Elena's not just beautiful, which, let's be honest, she is. She's also incredibly well connected. Her father's company is worth hundreds of millions. The man has business interests in 6 different countries, and as his son-in-law, I get a seat at that table. Silence. Then nervous laughter from someone, quickly cut off. Dude, Caleb said, voice low. You love her, right? Sure. Gavin's tone was light, casual, like he was discussing the weather. She's sweet, a little naive, but that works in my favor. Makes everything easier. Elena's hand tightened on the doorframe. The bouquet trembled. Easier how? Noah asked. Easier to manage. Look, I'm in a tight spot financially. Tighter than any of you know. I made some bad investments, took out loans from people who don't exactly accept late payments. I need capital, fast, and I need connections to rebuild. Marrying Elena gives me both. Aaron whistled low. That's cold, man. That's practical. Gavin's voice was harder now, defensive. In 2 years, maybe 3, once I've stabilized everything and built up my own portfolio, I'll find a way out. Site incompatibility, growing apart, whatever. She'll be heartbroken, sure, but she'll survive. Rich girls always do. And I'll walk away with connections, capital, and a reputation as a guy who was married to a Mercer. That opens doors. And Elena? Caleb's voice was tight. She just... What? Gets thrown away once you're done using her? She gets to say she was married to me. Gavin laughed, and the sound made Elena's stomach turn. That's not nothing. Besides, she'll land on her feet, probably remarry some other poor idiot within a year. Jesus. Noah sounded sick. Does she have any idea? Of course not. She thinks I'm Prince Charming. Swept off her feet, whole 9 yards. It's actually kind of impressive how easy it was. What about her dad? Caleb asked. Richard Mercer isn't stupid. You don't think he'll see through this? Richard loves me. Thinks I'm exactly what his daughter needs. Ambitious, driven, good family background. I've played that role perfectly. By the time he figures out anything's wrong, if he ever does, it'll be too late. I'll have legal ties to the family, access to information, leverage. You can't just cut someone out when they're married to your daughter. This is insane, Aaron said, but he was laughing. You're actually going to marry this girl just to raid her family's resources and then bail? Not raid. Utilize. There's a difference. Gavin's voice was smooth again, confident. And she'll never know the real reason. As far as Elena's concerned, we just grew apart. Happens all the time. What if she finds out? Noah asked. She won't. But if she does, then I deny everything, make her look paranoid or bitter, and speed up the exit timeline. Either way, I win. There was another round of laughter, more uncomfortable now, and someone said something about needing another drink. The voices started to move away, growing fainter. Elena stood frozen behind the door. Her hands were shaking so badly the bouquet rustled. She watched as a single petal fell from one of the roses, drifting to the floor like a piece of evidence. She'd heard every word. Every single word. The room felt like it was spinning, the walls contracting and expanding in rhythm with her heartbeat. She pressed her free hand against her stomach, trying to anchor herself to something solid, something real. The boning in her corset dug into her ribs. Strategically positioned, naive, easy to manage, utilize, exit timeline. The man she was supposed to marry in, she glanced at the antique clock on the wall. 11 minutes wasn't who she thought he was. Wasn't even close. He was a con artist, a user, a liar so skilled she hadn't seen a single crack in the performance, and he'd been performing for 14 months. Elena moved away from the door on instinct, her body operating on autopilot while her brain tried to catch up with what she'd just heard. She found herself back in front of the mirror, staring at the woman in the wedding dress. That woman looked calm, composed, beautiful. That woman looked like someone who had absolutely no idea her life had just detonated. A knock on the door made her jump. Elena? Her father's voice, gentle and worried. Sweetheart, it's time. Time. Right. The ceremony. She was supposed to walk down an aisle toward Gavin Sterling and promise to love, honor, and cherish him. She was supposed to sign documents that would legally bind her to a man who had just described their relationship as a strategic business move with a planned exit date. She should call it off. Obviously. Stop everything right now, tell her father what she'd heard, cancel the ceremony, send everyone home. But even as the thought formed, Elena's mind was already racing ahead, analyzing angles the way she'd seen her father analyze business deals. If she stopped the ceremony now, Gavin would know she'd overheard him. He'd deny everything, claim she'd misunderstood, maybe even twist it around on her. There were no recordings, no proof, just her word against his. And he was good. She'd seen how good he was at lying. He'd probably convince half the room that she was the one being irrational, that cold feet had made her paranoid. And even if people believed her, then what? Gavin would walk away, probably move on to his next target, and continue running the same scheme on someone else. Some other woman who wouldn't have the advantage of overhearing his confession. The knock came again. "Elena? Everything okay?" In the mirror, Elena watched her own face transform. The shock and hurt smoothed away, replaced by something colder, sharper. If Gavin Sterling wanted to play games, she'd play. But he'd be playing by her rules now. She picked up her bouquet, adjusted her veil, and opened the door with a smile that could have graced the cover of a bridal magazine. "Sorry," she said to her father, her voice steady and bright. "Just had to take a moment. Pre-wedding meditation." Her father beamed, relief washing over his face. "You look absolutely perfect, sweetheart. Gavin's a lucky man." "Isn't he, though?" Elena said softly. They walked through the hallways of the estate, her hand tucked into the crook of her father's elbow. Through the French doors, she could see the ceremony set up, rows of white chairs filled with guests, flower arrangements that had cost more than some people's monthly rent, an archway wrapped in greenery where Gavin stood waiting. He looked perfect, too. Tuxedo tailored to precision, hairstyle just right, expression radiating joy and love and anticipation. He could have stepped out of a wedding catalog. Elena wondered how many times he'd practiced that expression in a mirror. The music swelled, her cue. Her father squeezed her hand. "Ready?" he whispered. Elena took a breath, thought of Gavin's voice saying she's sweet, a little naive, but that works in my favor, and felt something inside her crystallize into diamond-hard resolve. "Ready," she said. They stepped into the doorway, and 200 faces turned to look at her. The walk down the aisle felt surreal, like she was watching herself in a movie. Faces blurred past. Family friends, business associates, college roommates, Gavin's relatives who she'd met a handful of times and who seemed nice enough, though who could tell anymore what was real and what was performance? Gavin's eyes were on her, warm and loving. When she reached him, he took her hand and leaned in to whisper, "You're breathtaking." Up close, she could see every detail of his face. The tiny scar on his chin from a childhood bike accident, or so he'd told her. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. All the little things she'd memorized over 14 months, thinking they were pieces of the man she loved. Now they just looked like parts of a mask. "Thank you," she whispered back, and her smile didn't slip an inch. The officiant began the ceremony with traditional words about love and commitment and the joining of two souls. Elena heard herself responding at all the right moments. "I do, I will, forever." When it came time for the vows, Gavin went first. "Elena," he said, and his voice carried across the garden, rich with emotion. "When I met you, I didn't believe in love at first sight, but you changed everything. You're brilliant, beautiful, kind, everything I never knew I needed. Standing here today, promising my life to yours, is the easiest decision I've ever made. I vow to love you, protect you, and stand beside you through whatever comes. You're my partner, my best friend, my future." Several guests dabbed at their eyes. Her mother was openly crying. Elena felt nothing but a distant clinical observation. He's good at this, really good. Then it was her turn. She'd written her vows weeks ago, staying up late one night to pour her heart onto paper. They'd been honest and raw and full of all the love she'd thought they shared. Looking at Gavin now, those vows felt like they belonged to a different person, a different life. So Elena took a breath and said them anyway. "Gavin, you came into my life when I least expected it, and you changed everything. You showed me what partnership could look like, what it meant to have someone really see me." She paused, held his gaze. "I promise to stand beside you, no matter what challenges we face. I promise honesty, loyalty, and faith in the life we're building together. I promise to always, always see things clearly." Something flickered in Gavin's expression. Confusion, maybe, at the slight emphasis she'd put on that last line. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by his perfect, loving smile. The officiant pronounced them married. Gavin kissed her, and the crowd erupted in applause. Elena kissed him back and thought, "I'm going to destroy you." The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, all soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers, and tables decorated with more flowers than Elena had ever seen in one place. The evening unfolded exactly as planned. The first dance, the toasts, the cake cutting, all of it choreographed in time to perfection. Elena played her role flawlessly. She laughed at the right moments during the best man's speech. She cried during her father's toast. She danced with Gavin and rested her head on his shoulder while cameras flashed around them. But she was also watching, observing, taking mental notes. The way Gavin's friend Aaron got progressively drunker and louder as the night went on. The way Noah, the quiet groomsman, kept shooting guilty looks in her direction. The way Caleb, the best man, seemed nervous whenever she got too close. They knew. At least Caleb and Noah knew, and probably suspected she might have overheard something, though they couldn't be sure. That was good. Uncertainty was useful. Between the formal dances and the photos, Elena found herself near the bar when Noah approached. He was maybe 28, worked in finance with Gavin, had always been polite but distant at wedding events. Now he looked like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin. "Elena, he said, too loud, then corrected his volume. "Elena, beautiful ceremony." "Thank you, Noah." She smiled at him, warm and guileless. "Having fun?" Yes, it's..." He stopped, swallowed. "Look, can I talk to you for a second? Privately?" Elena's heart rate picked up, but her expression stayed pleasant. "Of course. Is everything okay?" They moved to a corner of the ballroom, near the French doors that opened onto a terrace. The music and conversation provided cover, making their talk feel private, even in a room full of people. Noah glanced around, then back at her. His face was flushed, whether from alcohol or nerves, Elena couldn't tell. "I just wanted to say congratulations," he started, which was clearly not what he wanted to say at all. Elena waited. "And also," Noah's hands were shaking slightly, "also that Gavin's a lucky guy. Really lucky. You seem like a great person." "That's sweet of you to say." "I mean it." Noah's voice dropped lower. "You deserve someone who sees that, who appreciates it." There was something in his tone, a weight to the words that felt like a warning, or maybe a confession. Elena tilted her head, maintaining her innocent expression. "I think I have that, don't you? Gavin and I are very happy." Noah looked like he wanted to say something else, something that mattered, but couldn't figure out how to start. The internal struggle played across his face like subtitles. Finally, he just nodded. Yeah, of course. Be careful, okay?" Careful of what? But Noah was already backing away, shaking his head. "Nothing. Forget it. Congratulations again." He disappeared into the crowd before Elena could push further. Interesting. An hour later, during a lull when Gavin was occupied with photos with his family, Elena spotted Mia near the dessert table and made her way over. Her sister looked beautiful in her bridesmaid dress, but she also looked concerned. The second Elena got close enough, Mia grabbed her arm. "Okay, what's wrong?" Mia asked quietly. "What do you mean?" "You're performing, Elena. I've known you for 26 years. I can tell when you're putting on a show." Mia's eyes scanned her face. "What happened?" Elena hesitated. The ballroom was full of people, any of whom could be watching, but Mia was a law student, sharp as a razor and already thinking in terms of evidence and proof and how to build a case. If Elena was going to do this, and she'd decided the moment she'd walked down the aisle that she absolutely was, she'd need help. "Not here," Elena murmured. "Tomorrow. Come to the house around 10. Tell Mom you're helping me sort thank you cards or something." "Elena, you're scaring me." Good. You should be scared." Elena's smile was still in place, bright and perfect for anyone watching. "Gavin isn't who we think he is, and I need your help proving it." Mia's expression went very still, very serious. She didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations, just nodded once and said, 10 o'clock, I'll be there." The reception continued into the night. Elena danced with her new husband, accepted congratulations from hundreds of guests, ate a piece of wedding cake that tasted like air and sugar. Around 11, Gavin pulled her close during a slow song and whispered in her ear, "I can't wait to get you alone, Mrs. Sterling." The name felt like a brand, a caller. Elena leaned back just enough to meet his eyes. "Soon," she promised, and let him interpret that however he wanted. When the evening finally wound down and they were saying goodbye to the last stragglers, Elena's mother hugged her tightly and whispered, "I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. You found a wonderful man." Elena hugged her back and thought about how much her mother would hate Gavin when the truth came out. How embarrassed she'd be, how hurt. The Mercers had hosted this lavish wedding, invited everyone they knew, celebrated this union, and it was built on lies. But if Elena played this right, her mother wouldn't be embarrassed. Instead, she'd be proud of the daughter who'd been smart enough to see through the con and strong enough to dismantle it. Gavin had assumed Elena was naive, easy to manage, sweet and trusting. He was about to find out exactly how wrong he was. At midnight, they finally left the reception in a shower of rose petals and good wishes. The plan had been to spend the night at a luxury hotel downtown before leaving for their honeymoon. 2 weeks in the Greek islands, all planned and paid for. Elena wondered if they'd even make it to the airport. In the car, Gavin was buzzing with energy, talking about the ceremony, who'd shown up, which business connections he'd made sure to speak with. Elena listened with half her attention and used the other half to plan. Tomorrow, Mia would come over. They'd start digging into Gavin's background, real digging, the kind that went beyond surface-level public records. If he'd run this con before, there would be evidence. Complaints, lawsuits, patterns of behavior that looked innocent alone but damning when viewed together. And those groomsmen, Caleb and Noah especially, knew something. They might not have been active participants in Gavin's scheme, but they had information. Elena would need that information. "You're quiet," Gavin observed, reaching over to take her hand. "Tired?" "Exhausted," Elena admitted, which was true. It had been the longest day of her life, and it wasn't even over yet. "Well, we've got 2 weeks to relax and celebrate." He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. "Just you and me in paradise. I can't wait." 2 weeks. In Gavin's timeline, these were supposed to be the honeymoon weeks where he fully cemented his position in her life, made himself indispensable, started the subtle work of gaining access to her father's business interests. In Elena's timeline, these were 2 weeks where she'd have time to plan without Gavin looking over her shoulder, time to coordinate with Mia, time to figure out exactly how to trap him. They arrived at the hotel. Gavin tipped the valet generously, using whose money, Elena wondered, and they made their way to the suite he'd reserved. It was beautiful, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a bedroom that looked like something out of a magazine, champagne chilling in a bucket by the window. Gavin popped the champagne and poured 2 glasses. "To my beautiful wife," he said, raising his glass. Elena raised hers in return. "To my husband." They clinked glasses, drank. The champagne was expensive and perfect and tasted like revenge waiting to happen. The morning after the wedding, Elena woke up alone in the hotel suite. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting geometric patterns across the white sheets. For a single, disoriented moment, she forgot everything. The overheard conversation, the fake vows, the performance she'd given for 200 guests. Then she heard the shower running in the bathroom and remembered all of it at once. She sat up slowly, her wedding dress from the night before hanging on the back of a chair like a ghost. Gavin had been attentive, romantic, everything a new husband was supposed to be. He'd kissed her like he meant it, held her like she was precious, whispered sweet things that would have melted her heart 48 hours ago. Now every touch felt like a transaction. Every kiss felt like part of his strategy. Elena picked up her phone from the nightstand. 3 messages from Mia, all sent around 7 in the morning. "Still coming over at 10? Please tell me you're okay. Elena, I'm worried. Text me back." Elena typed quickly. "I'm fine. See you at 10. Don't tell anyone." The shower shut off. A minute later, Gavin emerged in a cloud of steam, towel wrapped around his waist, hair damp and perfect. He smiled when he saw her awake. "Morning, beautiful." I was going to order room service. Thought we could have breakfast before we head to the airport. The honeymoon. 2 weeks in Greece that Elena had been excited about for months. Now the thought of being trapped on islands with Gavin, pretending everything was perfect while knowing exactly what he was, made her skin crawl. But canceling would raise questions, suspicions. Elena returned his smile. That sounds perfect. I'm starving. Over breakfast, eggs Benedict for her, steak and eggs for him, both ridiculously expensive, Gavin talked about their itinerary. Santorini first, then Mykonos, maybe a day trip to Crete, if they had time. He'd planned everything, he said, every detail. Of course he had. This was part of the investment, part of making her fall deeper so she'd never question him later. I can't wait to just relax with you, he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. No work, no obligations, just us. Elena squeezed his hand and thought about how satisfying it would be to watch his face when everything fell apart. Just us, she echoed. They checked out of the hotel by noon. The plan was to go back to Elena's apartment, well, their apartment now, since Gavin had moved most of his things in over the past month, to grab their luggage before heading to the airport for a 6 o'clock flight. But Elena had other plans. Actually, she said as they climbed into the car, would you mind if we stopped by my parents' house first? I forgot to give my mom something yesterday, and it's been bothering me. It was a weak excuse, barely plausible, but Gavin just nodded easily. Sure, no problem. We've got plenty of time. Elena directed him to her childhood home in the suburbs, a sprawling colonial with a circular driveway and gardens her mother obsessed over. Mia's car was already parked on the street. She'd texted that she'd come early and was waiting in the backyard. I'll just be a minute, Elena said as Gavin pulled up to the house. Want to wait here? I'll come in and say hi to your mom. Of course he would, another opportunity to play the devoted son-in-law. But when they walked inside, the house was quiet. Elena's mother was out. She'd mentioned something at the wedding about a brunch with friends today, processing the events of the ceremony with her social circle. Mom, Elena called out anyway, playing the part. No answer. Guess she's not home, Gavin said. What did you need to give her? Elena thought fast. A card from one of the guests, but I think I left it in my old room. I'll grab it real quick. She headed upstairs before Gavin could offer to come with her, moving quickly down the familiar hallway to her childhood bedroom. The yellow walls she'd woken up to yesterday morning felt like they belonged to a different lifetime. She texted Mia, Gavin's here, backyard in 2 minutes. Stay hidden. Then she grabbed a random thank you card from the stationery set on her desk, something she actually could give to her mother later, making the excuse retroactively true, and headed back downstairs. Gavin was in the living room, looking at family photos on the mantel. He turned when she entered, and something about the way he was studying those photos made Elena's stomach turn. He was probably cataloging them, filing away information about her family that he could use later. Got it, Elena said brightly, holding up the card. Sorry about the detour. No worries, he checked his watch. We should probably head out, though. Traffic to the airport can be brutal. Actually, do you mind if I run out back for just a second? I want to check on my mom's rose bushes. She was worried one of them was dying, and with everything happening yesterday, I forgot to look. Gavin's expression flickered, just for a second, so fast she almost missed it. Impatience, irritation. Then it smoothed back into indulgent understanding. Sure, babe, but make it quick, okay? Elena slipped through the kitchen and out the back door into the sprawling garden. Her mother's roses were in full bloom along the fence line, perfectly healthy, which would have made her excuse obvious if Gavin had known anything about plants. But he didn't, because he'd never bothered to learn despite her mother talking about her garden at length every time they visited. Mia was waiting behind the pool house, partially hidden by a large oak tree. She stepped out when she saw Elena, and the expression on her face was pure professional focus. Talk, Mia said quietly. Now. Elena kept one eye on the back door as she spoke, words tumbling out in a rushed whisper. She told Mia everything, the overheard conversation, every word Gavin had said, the way the groomsmen had reacted, Noah's awkward warning at the reception. Mia's expression went from concern to furious in about 30 seconds. That son of a... She cut herself off, breathing hard. Okay, we need to be smart about this. Do you have any proof, recordings, texts, anything? No, just what I heard. Which means it's your word against his, and he'll just deny it. Mia's legal training was kicking in, her mind clearly racing through scenarios. We need evidence, real, undeniable evidence. I know. That's why I need you to dig into his background while I'm gone. Find out if he's done this before. There have to be other women, other targets. I can do that. Mia pulled out her phone, already making notes. I'll start with public records, civil suits, complaints, any legal issues. Then I'll expand from there. What about those groomsmen, the ones who were there when you overheard? Caleb and Noah definitely know something. Aaron might too. Noah seemed guilty last night, like he wanted to warn me but couldn't figure out how. Then we need to talk to them, get them on record. Not yet. Elena glanced back at the house. She'd been out here for almost 3 minutes. If we approach them now, they might warn Gavin. We need to be subtler. What's your plan? Elena had been thinking about this all night, lying awake next to Gavin while he slept the satisfied sleep of someone whose con was going perfectly. I'm going to Greece, going to play the happy newlywed, give him absolutely no reason to suspect I know anything. She met Mia's eyes. While I'm gone, you gather everything you can find on him, every detail, every discrepancy. When I get back, we'll have 2 weeks' worth of evidence and he'll still think he's in complete control. That's 2 weeks of you pretending everything's fine while being alone with him on the other side of the world, Mia said slowly. Are you sure that's safe? I'm sure. Gavin thinks I'm naive and easy to manipulate. He's not going to hurt me. I'm too valuable. He needs me cooperative and in love. The words tasted bitter. Besides, if he wanted to harm me physically, he would have done it by now. This is a long con, not a violent crime. You don't know that for sure. I know enough. Elena squeezed her sister's hand. Trust me, okay? I can handle 2 weeks. I've been handling him for 14 months without even knowing he was lying. Now that I know, it'll be easier. Mia looked like she wanted to argue more, but footsteps sounded from inside the house. Gavin's voice called out, Elena, you okay out there? Coming, Elena called back. To Mia, she whispered, start with property records and business filings. Look for patterns. And be careful, if he's desperate enough to marry for money, he might be dangerous if he feels cornered. Same to you, Mia said fiercely. Text me every day. I don't care what time it is there. Every single day, or I'm calling the police and Dad and everyone else I can think of. Elena hugged her sister quickly, feeling the fear and anger vibrating through both of them. Then she straightened up, fixed her smile in place, and walked back toward the house. Gavin was standing on the patio, hands in his pockets, looking slightly annoyed despite his pleasant expression. Everything okay with the roses? He asked. Perfect, Elena said. Mom's going to be so relieved. We should go, though. You're right about the traffic. They left her parents' house and drove to the apartment. Elena moved through the familiar space with new eyes, seeing all of Gavin's belongings mixed with hers. His books on the shelves, his jacket on the coat rack, his coffee mug in the dish drainer. He'd integrated himself into her life so completely, so smoothly. She wondered how many times he'd practiced this. How many other women's apartments had held his things before he'd moved on to the next target. The thought made her feel sick and angry in equal measure. At the airport, Gavin was the perfect travel companion. He handled their boarding passes, made sure she had everything she needed, bought her favorite magazine from the newsstand. Every gesture calculated, every smile designed to make her feel cherished. Elena played along, letting him think it was working. The flight to Athens was long and exhausting. Elena pretended to sleep for most of it, avoiding conversation, but really she was thinking, planning, running through scenarios in her mind. By the time they landed in Greece, she had the shape of a strategy. The islands were beautiful, impossibly blue water, white buildings climbing hillsides, sunsets that looked like paintings. Under different circumstances, Elena would have loved every second. Now she moved through it like an actress on a set, hitting her marks, saying her lines. Gavin played his role too. Attentive husband, romantic partner. He took her to nice dinners, arranged for couples massages, surprised her with flowers delivered to their hotel room. Every night, Elena texted Mia the same message. Still okay? Any news? And every morning, Mia's response came back. Working on it. Stay safe. On the fourth day, while Gavin was taking a business call on the hotel balcony, so much for no work, Elena thought darkly, she got a longer text from Mia. Found something. 3 women in the past 6 years have filed civil suits against Gavin. 2 were settled out of court, 1 was dismissed. All 3 claim financial manipulation during relationships. One called it a relationship scam. Court records are sealed, but I'm digging into the lawyers involved. Elena's hands shook as she typed back, "Can you find the women? Get them to talk?" Already on it. 2 of them live out of state, but 1 is local. Ashley Morrison. She dated Gavin 4 years ago. I have her contact info if you want me to reach out. Wait until I'm back. We need to do this carefully. Understood. Be careful. Elena deleted the text thread and put her phone away just as Gavin came back inside, looking irritated. Everything okay? She asked. Work stuff, nothing important. He kissed the top of her head. Sorry about that. I promised no business, and I meant it. Phone's going off for the rest of the trip. Liar, Elena thought. But out loud she just said, I appreciate that. The days blurred together. Santorini with its stunning views and romantic restaurants. Mykonos with its beaches and nightlife. Every moment carefully photographed and posted to social media. Gavin made sure of that, Elena noticed. Building the narrative of their perfect marriage for public consumption. She wondered if that was part of his plan too. Make the marriage look so solid that when he eventually wanted out, people would be shocked, sympathetic to him. On day 9, while they were having breakfast at a cafe overlooking the caldera, Gavin's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression went tight for just a second before he recovered. Who is it? Elena asked lightly. Unknown number. Probably spam. He silenced the phone. But Elena had seen the screen before he turned it over. Not an unknown number. A contact labeled simply D. Who was D? That night, when Gavin was in the shower, Elena took a risk. She grabbed his phone from the nightstand, her heart hammering. It was locked, of course, but she tried the obvious password first. His birthday. Nothing. Their anniversary. Nothing. On impulse, she tried her birthday. The phone unlocked. Elena's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She opened his messages, scrolling quickly, looking for the contact labeled D. There. A thread of messages going back months. D. You said you'd have the first payment by now. Gavin. I need more time. The timeline moved up. D. That's not my problem. You owe $85,000 and interest is accumulating daily. Gavin. I'm handling it. 2 months, max. D. You have until the end of summer. After that, we handle it our way. The messages were from 3 weeks ago, right before the wedding. Elena kept scrolling, finding older messages that painted an even darker picture. Gavin owed money to multiple people. This D character seemed to be the most aggressive, but there were other threads too. Other creditors. Other threats. One message from 2 months ago made her blood run cold. Gavin to someone named Marcus. The Mercer girl is perfect. Rich family, trusting, no prenup because I convinced her it was unromantic. Once we're married, I'll have access to everything. 6 months to stabilize, then I'm out. Elena heard the shower turn off. She quickly closed the messages, locked the phone, put it back exactly where she'd found it. Her hands were still shaking when Gavin emerged, smiling, completely unaware. Want to take a walk down to the beach? He asked. The sunset should be amazing in about an hour. Elena looked at him, this man she'd promised to love and cherish, this man who had systematically lied to her for over a year, and felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. That sounds perfect, she said. They walked along the beach as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Gavin held her hand and talked about their future, where they might want to live eventually, whether they wanted kids, all the things couples planning a life together discussed. Elena listened and made appropriate responses and thought about the messages on his phone. $85,000. End of summer. Multiple creditors. We handle it our way. Gavin wasn't just a con artist, he was desperate, and desperate people were dangerous. That night, after Gavin fell asleep, Elena lay awake staring at the ceiling and recalculating. She'd assumed Gavin's plan was long-term, marry her, gain access to family resources, build his own wealth, then exit cleanly. A patient scam. But the messages suggested something different. He needed money fast, which meant he might not wait months or years to make his move. He might try to access her father's business accounts immediately, or push for control over her own finances, or... Elena's breath caught. What if he'd planned for something to happen to her? No, that was paranoid thinking. Gavin wasn't a murderer, he was just a liar and a thief. Wasn't he? But that message to Marcus. Once we're married, I'll have access to everything, including life insurance policies, inheritances, business shares that would transfer to a surviving spouse. Elena got out of bed carefully, trying not to wake Gavin. She went into the bathroom, locked the door, and called Mia. It was the middle of the night in Greece, which meant late afternoon back home. Mia answered on the first ring. What's wrong? I need you to check something. Elena kept her voice low. My will, life insurance, any policies or documents where Gavin would benefit if something happened to me. A pause. Then Mia's voice, very carefully controlled. Elena, what did he do? Nothing yet, but I saw messages on his phone. He's in debt, Mia. Serious debt to people who don't sound like legitimate lenders, and he needs money by end of summer. That's 3 months away. I know. Are you safe right now? Elena looked at the bathroom door, thought about Gavin sleeping peacefully on the other side. I think so. He still needs me cooperative, but I'm coming home early. I'll tell him I'm sick or something, make up an excuse. Do it tomorrow, first flight you can get. I will, but first check those documents. And Mia? Elena's voice hardened. Find out who D is. Someone Gavin owes $85,000 to. Track down the other creditors if you can. I want to know exactly how deep he's in. I'm on it. Elena, I'm serious. If you feel unsafe at all, get to the embassy. Call the police. Don't wait. I won't. I promise. Elena ended the call and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked tired, scared. But underneath that, she could see something else. The same cold determination that had carried her down the aisle. Gavin Sterling had made a fatal error. He'd assumed she was weak, easy prey. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. The next morning, Elena woke Gavin early with her hand on his shoulder and an expression of distress on her face. I'm so sorry, she said, but I feel awful. I think I have food poisoning or something. Everything hurts. Gavin sat up immediately, concern flooding his features. What do you need? Should we find a doctor? I just want to go home. Elena let her voice break slightly. I know it's cutting the trip short and I feel terrible about it, but I can't enjoy anything feeling like this. Can we get a flight back today? For just a second, so brief she almost missed it, Gavin looked annoyed. Then it was gone, replaced by worried husband mode. Of course, let me see what I can arrange. Don't worry about anything, just rest. He spent the morning on the phone, rebooking flights, managing logistics. Elena stayed in bed, playing sick, monitoring every interaction. At one point, she heard him on the phone with someone, his voice low and tense. I know. It's just a few days earlier than planned. Everything's still on track. Who was he talking to? Elena strained to hear more, but Gavin moved to the balcony and closed the door. They flew back that evening, Elena maintaining her performance of being unwell throughout the journey. Gavin was solicitous and kind, bringing her water, making sure she had a blanket on the plane. The perfect concerned husband. They landed back home close to midnight. Elena insisted on going to her apartment rather than her parents' house, not wanting to wake them. Gavin agreed easily. Of course he did. The apartment was where he'd moved all his things, where he was most comfortable. As they unpacked in the quiet apartment, Elena's phone buzzed. A text from Mia. We need to talk. Tomorrow. Found something big. Elena's heart rate kicked up, but she kept her expression neutral as she replied, Okay. Your place? 10 a.m.? Make it 9. You need to see this. The next morning, Elena told Gavin she had a coffee date with Mia to catch up after the trip. He barely looked up from his laptop. He'd been glued to it since they'd gotten home, typing furiously, stress evident in every line of his body. Have fun, he said absently. I've got some work stuff to catch up on anyway. Elena drove to Mia's apartment with a sense of dread mixed with anticipation. Whatever her sister had found, it was significant. Mia's place was a small one-bedroom in a building near the law school, decorated in early graduate student minimalism. But when Elena arrived, the living room had been transformed into something that looked like a conspiracy theorist's dream. Papers spread across every surface, sticky notes on the walls. Her laptop open to what looked like a dozen different tabs. Mia looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Tell me," Elena said. Her sister picked up a manila folder thick with documents. Gavin Sterling isn't even his real name. The world tilted slightly. "What?" "His birth name is Gavin Christopher Morrison. He changed it legally 7 years ago to Gavin Sterling. Want to guess why?" Elena's mind was racing. To distance himself from something. From 3 lawsuits and a bankruptcy. All under his original name, all related to what the courts called financial impropriety and intimate relationships. Mia opened the folder, pulled out a document. "Remember I mentioned Ashley Morrison? She's his ex-wife." "His what?" "They were married for 18 months. She filed for divorce citing fraud and financial abuse. According to the court records, Gavin convinced her to take out loans in her name to fund his business ventures. Then he drained her accounts and disappeared. She was left with $140,000 in debt." Elena sat down heavily on Mia's couch. "He's done this before." "Multiple times. Ashley was the legal wife, but I found 2 other women who filed civil suits. Both cases settled with ND as attached, which is why they don't show up in standard background checks. I got copies of the initial filings before they were sealed." Mia handed over more papers. Maria Chen dated Gavin for 8 months, lost $60,000. Jennifer Walsh dated him for a year, lost $90,000 plus her business failed after he sabotaged a major deal. "How many women?" Elena's voice sounded hollow. "That I can prove?" "4, including you. But I think there are more. The timeline suggests he does this every 2 to 3 years, finds a target, builds the relationship, extracts what he can, and moves on." Mia's expression was fierce. "You're just the latest, Elena, and probably the biggest score he's ever attempted." Elena stared at the documents in her hands. Names, dates, amounts. A clear pattern of predatory behavior, stretching back almost a decade. "There's more," Mia said quietly. "The creditor you asked about? D? That's Dominic Volkov. He runs what's technically a private lending business, but is actually a front for loan sharking. Interest rates of 30% or higher, collection methods that are," she made air quotes, "aggressively persuasive." "How much does Gavin owe him?" "According to records I really shouldn't have been able to access, about $90,000 now, with interest. But Volkov isn't the only one. Gavin has debts with at least 4 different lenders, totaling somewhere around $250,000. Elena felt cold. "He needs that money fast. End of summer, based on what you saw in his messages. After that," Mia trailed off. "After that, people like Volkov handle it their way." Elena looked up at her sister. "He's not just conning me for money. He's desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. Which is why we're going to the police. Today. Right now." Mia was already reaching for her phone. "This is enough for fraud charges at minimum, possibly identity fraud depending on how he represented himself to you. We take this to the authorities and let them handle it." "No." Mia froze. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, we can't go to the police yet." Elena's mind was crystallizing around a plan, sharp and clear. "Think about it. What do we actually have? Evidence that he lied about his past, that he owes money, that he's run scams before. But he hasn't actually taken anything from me yet. Hasn't committed any crime against me specifically. He married you under false pretenses, which isn't illegal. Immoral, yes. Grounds for annulment, absolutely. But not criminal." Elena stood up, started pacing. "If we go to the police now, they'll investigate. Maybe charge him with his previous crimes if the statute of limitations hasn't run out. But he'll know I'm onto him. He'll disappear, reinvent himself again, and find another victim. Better than letting him steal from you." "I'm not going to let him steal from me." Elena's voice was hard. "I'm going to let him try. I'm going to give him exactly enough rope to hang himself. And then I'm going to make sure he never does this to anyone else again. Mia stared at her. You want to set a trap. I want to catch him in the act, with evidence so clear, so undeniable that there's no way he walks away. No settlements, no NDAs, no disappearing to start over with a new name. Elena met her sister's eyes. You said it yourself. He's gotten away with this for years because his victims couldn't prove intent. But if we catch him actually stealing, actually committing fraud in real time, that's a different story. That's also dangerous. You're talking about deliberately making yourself a target. I'm already a target. Have been since the moment Gavin decided I was worth conning. Elena's jaw set. The only difference is now I know it, and I'm going to use that knowledge to end him. Mia was quiet for a long moment, her expression cycling through worry and reluctance and finally grudging acceptance. Okay, she said, but we do this smart. We document everything. We keep evidence secured where he can't access it. And the absolute second you feel unsafe, we pull the plug and go to the authorities anyway. Deal? Deal. They spent the next 2 hours planning. Mia would continue researching, building the case file, and most importantly, she'd reach out to Ashley Morrison and the other victims. If they could get statements, testimony about Gavin's patterns and methods, it would strengthen everything. Elena would go home and continue playing the role of loving wife while watching for Gavin's next move. Whatever he was planning, whatever method he intended to use to access money, Elena would be ready. One more thing, Mia said as Elena was getting ready to leave. I looked into your life insurance and estate documents like you asked. If something happened to you, Gavin would get $500,000 from your policy, plus your inheritance from the family trust, plus shares in Dad's company that are held in your name. Elena felt sick. How much total? Roughly $3 million, depending on company valuation. $3 million, more than enough to pay off all Gavin's debts and set him up for years. He's not going to hurt me, Elena said, as much to convince herself as Mia. That's too risky, too many questions. People have killed for a lot less than $3 million. But murder is hard to get away with, especially of a new bride. The husband is always the first suspect. Gavin's smart enough to know that. Elena tried to sound confident. He'll go for a financial play. Embezzlement, fraud, something where he can take the money and run before anyone notices. I hope you're right. Elena hugged her sister goodbye and drove home with her mind spinning. The weight of what she was doing, deliberately walking into a trap while trying to build one of her own, pressed down on her like a physical force. But underneath the fear was something else. Something that had been growing since she'd overheard that conversation through the half-open door. Anger. Pure, cold, focused anger at a man who'd looked her in the eyes and lied every single day for 14 months. Who'd stood at an altar and made vows he never intended to keep. Who'd turned their relationship into a transaction and her into a mark. Gavin Sterling, or Gavin Morrison, or whoever he really was, had made a terrible miscalculation. He thought Elena Mercer was weak. He was about to find out she was anything but. When Elena returned to the apartment, Gavin was still at his laptop, but the tension in his shoulders had ratcheted up several notches. His jaw was tight, his fingers moving across the keyboard with sharp, aggressive taps that suggested whatever he was dealing with wasn't going well. He barely looked up when she came in. How was Mia? He asked, his tone distracted. Good. She wanted to hear about the trip. Elena set her purse down, watching him carefully. Everything okay with work? Fine. The word came out clipped. Then he seemed to realize how he sounded and forced a smile. Sorry, just dealing with some annoying client issues. Nothing major. Liar, Elena thought. Out loud, she said, Want me to make lunch? I could do that pasta thing you like. That'd be great, thanks. Elena moved into the kitchen, grateful for the excuse to have her back to him while her mind raced. The stress radiating off Gavin was palpable. Whatever deadline he was facing with his creditors, it was clearly getting closer. She chopped vegetables and boiled water and thought about Mia's words. $3 million if something happened to her. The number felt obscene and terrifying in equal measure. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from her father. Lunch this week? Want to hear about the honeymoon? How's Tuesday? Elena's breath caught. Her father, Richard Mercer, who'd built a manufacturing empire from nothing, who'd welcomed Gavin into the family with open arms, who had no idea his new son-in-law was systematically planning to rob him blind. She typed back, Tuesday works. Just us? Or should I bring Gavin? Just us. Father-daughter time. Elena stared at that message for a long moment. Her father wanted to spend time with her, probably to talk about married life and the future and all the dreams he had for his daughter's happiness. She was going to have to tell him the truth eventually. The thought made her feel physically ill. But not yet. Not until she had everything she needed to make sure Gavin paid for what he'd done. Over the next week, Elena watched Gavin like a scientist observing a specimen. She cataloged every phone call he took in another room. Every time his expression went tight with stress, every moment his mask slipped just slightly. He was planning something. She could feel it. On Thursday afternoon, Gavin came home from what he'd said was a meeting with a potential client and seemed almost energized. The stress that had been crushing him for days had lifted slightly, replaced by something that looked like cautious optimism. Good meeting? Elena asked from the couch where she'd been pretending to read. Really good, actually. Gavin sat down beside her, pulled her close. I might have found a solution to some of those work issues I've been dealing with. That's great. Elena kept her voice light, curious. What kind of solution? Just a new partnership opportunity. Details are still being worked out, but it could be really lucrative. He kissed the top of her head. How would you feel about me maybe taking on a more active role in your dad's company? And there it was. Elena's heart started racing, but she kept her expression pleasantly neutral. What do you mean? Well, I've been thinking. Your dad's been talking about expanding the sustainable manufacturing division, right? That's actually an area where I have a lot of expertise. I could help him develop that. Maybe come on as a consultant or even a partner. Gavin's voice was smooth, persuasive. It would be good for the company, good for our future, and it would mean I'd be working with family. What could be better? What could be better, Elena thought darkly, than getting direct access to her father's business accounts and operations? This was the play. This was how Gavin planned to get his hands on enough money to pay off his debts. That sounds interesting, she said carefully. Have you talked to Dad about it? Not yet. I wanted to run it by you first, get your blessing. He smiled at her, warm and loving. You're my partner in everything, Elena. I wouldn't do this without you being on board. The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, making her feel included while really just ensuring she'd help him get access. Elena pretended to think about it. I mean, I think it's a great idea. Dad would probably love having you more involved. But you should know he's pretty protective of the company. He'll want to see a detailed proposal, probably have his lawyers review any partnership agreements. Something flickered in Gavin's expression. Frustration, quickly masked. Of course, I'd expect nothing less. Your dad's smart about these things. Gavin shifted slightly. Actually, there might be a faster way to get started, just to show him I'm serious about this. What if I made an initial investment, put some of my own money into the expansion project as a show of good faith? You want to invest your own money? Well, our money now, right? We're married. He said it so casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I was thinking I could put in maybe $50,000 to start. Really demonstrate commitment to the family business. Elena's mind raced. Gavin didn't have $50,000. He had debts totaling over $200,000. So where would this money come from? That's really generous, she said slowly. But I thought you said you had some cash flow issues with your own business. She watched him calculate his response, saw the split-second decision play across his features. I did, but I've been working on solving that. Besides, this is an investment in our future. Sometimes you have to spend money to make money. He squeezed her hand. And honestly, if I needed to access some funds short-term to make this happen, would you be comfortable adding me to your bank accounts, just so I could transfer what we need for the investment? There. The actual ask, wrapped in layers of justification and romance. Elena felt a surge of cold fury that she had to swallow down before responding. I guess that makes sense, she said, keeping her voice uncertain, a little naive. Exactly what Gavin expected from her. We are married. It's weird not to share accounts, right? Exactly. Relief washed over Gavin's face. We're a team now. Full transparency, full partnership, full access to her money. More like it. Let me think about it, Elena said, buying herself time. It's a big step. I mean, I want to do it. I just want to make sure we set everything up right. Maybe talk to the bank about the best way to structure things? She could see Gavin fighting not to push harder, wanting to close this deal but knowing that seeming too eager would raise red flags. Of course, he said smoothly. Take whatever time you need. There's no rush. Except there was. End of summer. That's what the messages had said. Gavin needed money by end of summer or his creditors would collect in other ways. It was May now. He had maybe 3 months. That night, after Gavin fell asleep, Elena sent Mia a detailed text about the conversation. Her sister's response came through within minutes. He's making his move. This is good. We can use this. But do not give him access to your accounts. I won't. But I need to make him think I'm considering it. Keep him feeling confident. Careful. If he gets desperate, he might try something more direct. Let him try. I'll be ready. The next morning, Elena had lunch with her father at his favorite restaurant downtown. Richard Mercer was a man in his early 60s who'd built an empire through a combination of innovation, hard work, and an almost supernatural ability to read people. Elena had inherited that last trait, though she'd only recently started to fully appreciate it. He hugged her tight when she arrived, held her at arm's length to look at her. You look different, he said. Elena's stomach dropped. Different how? Older somehow. More serious. He smiled, but there was concern in his eyes. Marriage changes people, I suppose. How are you, sweetheart? Really? For a moment, Elena considered telling him everything. Right here, right now, just laying it all out and letting her father handle it. He had resources, connections, lawyers who could tear Gavin apart. But that wasn't the plan. And more importantly, Elena needed to do this herself. Needed to prove she was strong enough, smart enough, to handle her own problems. I'm good, Dad. Really. She sat down across from him. Marriage is an adjustment, but a good one. And Gavin? He's treating you well? He's perfect, Elena said, and the lie tasted like ash. They ordered lunch and made small talk about the honeymoon, about the wedding, about her father's latest project with the company. Then Richard set down his fork and gave her the look that meant serious conversation incoming. Gavin approached me yesterday, he said. Elena's heart stuttered. He did? About getting more involved with the company. Said he had some ideas about expanding the sustainable manufacturing division. Richard's expression was neutral, unreadable. What do you think about that? This was a test. Her father was asking her opinion, but he was also gauging her reaction, reading between the lines. Elena chose her words carefully. I think Gavin's ambitious. He wants to build something meaningful. That's not what I asked. I know. Elena met her father's eyes. Honestly, I think you should hear his proposal, listen to his ideas, and then make a decision based on the business case, not on the fact that he's married to me. Richard studied her for a long moment. You're being very diplomatic. I'm being practical. If Gavin has good ideas, the company benefits. If he doesn't, you'll see through it. Either way, I trust your judgment. But do you trust his? The question hung in the air between them. Elena thought about the debts, the lies, the pattern of destroyed relationships stretching back years. She thought about Gavin's real name, his real history, all the things her father didn't know. I think Gavin wants to prove himself, she said finally. I think he wants to be successful. Whether his methods for getting there are sound, that's what you'd need to evaluate. Richard nodded slowly. I'm going to have him put together a formal proposal. Full business plan, financial projections, the works. I'll have my team review it. That sounds reasonable. And Elena? Her father reached across the table, took her hand. If something's wrong, if you need help with anything, you know you can tell me, right? Elena's throat tightened. She squeezed his hand back. I know, Dad. I promise, if I need help, you'll be the first person I call. It wasn't quite a lie. When the time came to bring down Gavin, she'd absolutely need her father's help. Just not yet. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena watched Gavin throw himself into preparing his proposal for Richard. He worked long hours, made countless phone calls, filled notebooks with projections and plans. To anyone watching, he looked like a man genuinely trying to build something legitimate. But Elena noticed the details that didn't add up. The way some of his financial projections seemed to come from nowhere, with no real data to back them up. The way he kept pushing for faster timelines, wanting to get started immediately rather than going through proper due diligence. The way he casually asked Elena questions about her father's banking relationships, his signature authority, which accounts held what funds. He was gathering intelligence for a robbery disguised as a business partnership. Mia, meanwhile, had tracked down Ashley Morrison, Gavin's ex-wife. She called Elena one afternoon while Gavin was out, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I met with Ashley today. Elena, you need to hear what she told me." "I'm listening." "Gavin's pattern is always the same. He targets women who have money or family money, spends months building trust, making them fall in love. Then he starts the business opportunity pitch, says he wants to invest in something, needs temporary access to funds, promises massive returns." Mia paused. With Ashley, he convinced her to take out business loans in her name, said it was for a startup they'd run together. Then he transferred everything to offshore accounts and disappeared. How much did she lose? $140,000 in loans, plus another $60,000 in her personal savings. She spent years trying to track him down, but by the time she found him, he'd changed his name and moved to a different state. Her lawyers said pursuing it would cost more than she'd recover. Elena felt sick. So he got away with it. Completely. And the two other women I talked to, Maria and Jennifer, they told similar stories. Different details, but the same basic con. Build trust, create urgency, get access to money, disappear. Except this time he married me instead of just dating. Why? My guess? Your family's worth more than his previous targets. He needed the legal connection, the legitimacy that comes with being a Mercer son-in-law. Makes it easier to get access to bigger opportunities. And easier to disappear later with more money, Elena finished. Exactly. But here's the thing. All three women said they'd testify if we built a case against him. They want justice. They want to stop him from doing this to anyone else. Good. Keep them ready. We'll need them. Elena heard a car door slam outside. I have to go. Gavin's back. Be careful. Elena ended the call just as Gavin walked through the door, looking exhausted but satisfied. How'd it go? She asked. Good. Really good. He set down his briefcase, loosened his tie. I'm meeting with your dad's team next week to present the full proposal. If everything goes well, we could have a partnership agreement by mid-June. Mid-June. Still before end of summer, right on schedule for Gavin's deadline. That's exciting, Elena said, and meant it, though not for the reasons Gavin thought. That evening, Elena cooked dinner while Gavin worked on his laptop at the kitchen table. She'd become an expert at watching him without appearing to watch, catching glimpses of his screen when he thought she wasn't paying attention. Tonight, she saw emails to someone named Marcus, the same Marcus from the messages she'd seen in Greece. Gavin was writing about finalizing the plan and confirming the transfer protocols. Whatever Gavin was plotting, it was coming together, and Elena needed to make sure she was 3 steps ahead. After dinner, while Gavin was in the shower, Elena pulled out her phone and called the bank that held her primary accounts. She kept her voice low, professional. Hi, I need to add some additional security measures to my accounts. I want to set up dual authorization for any transfers over $5,000, and I need detailed notifications sent to this email for any account activity. She gave them her personal email, one Gavin didn't have access to. The representative walked her through the process, and Elena made sure to add one more thing. If anyone tries to add an authorized user to these accounts, I want to be notified immediately for approval, even if they have my login information. Can you flag that? Absolutely, Mrs. Sterling. I'll put a note on your file right now. Mrs. Sterling. The name still felt wrong, like wearing someone else's skin. Thank you, Elena said, and ended the call just as she heard the shower turn off. When Gavin emerged, she was curled up on the couch with a book, the picture of domestic contentment. "I was thinking," she said casually as he sat down beside her, "about what you said before with the bank accounts. I talked to my dad today, and he mentioned you'd approached him about the business proposal." Gavin's attention sharpened. "What did he say?" "He's interested, wants to see the full plan." Elena paused, as if considering her next words carefully. "And if you're going to be working that closely with the family business, it probably does make sense to have shared accounts. For transparency." She watched the relief and triumph wash over Gavin's face, quickly masked with appropriate humility. "Only if you're comfortable with it," he said. "I don't want to push." "You're not pushing. It makes sense." Elena smiled at him. "Let me set up a meeting with the bank. Maybe next week? After your presentation to Dad's team. That way, if the partnership goes through, we'll have everything ready." "That's perfect." Gavin kissed her, and Elena forced herself not to recoil. "You're amazing. You know that?" "I try," she said lightly. That night, Elena lay awake beside her sleeping husband and thought about what she was building. A trap constructed of trust and access, baited with exactly what Gavin wanted, designed to snap shut the moment he reached for it. Mia had the testimony of previous victims. Elena had documentation of Gavin's debts and his creditors. Now she just needed to catch him in the act of stealing, with evidence so clear that no lawyer could argue it away. The next morning, Elena drove to Mia's apartment to coordinate their next moves. Her sister had transformed her living room into even more of a command center than before, documents organized by category, a timeline on the wall tracking Gavin's history, contact information for everyone involved. "We need to involve Dad," Mia said immediately. "This is too big, Elena. Gavin's about to make a pitch to integrate with the company. Dad needs to know what he's walking into." "Not yet." Elena held up a hand. "Dad's too honest. He won't be able to fake not knowing. Gavin would see right through it." "Then what's the plan? Let Gavin actually steal from the company?" "In a controlled way? Yes." Elena pulled out her own notebook, started sketching out a strategy. "Here's what I'm thinking. Dad reviews Gavin's proposal and finds it interesting but risky. He offers a test run, gives Gavin limited authority to manage a small project, maybe 50 or 100,000. Enough to be significant, but not enough to sink the company if it disappears. And when Gavin steals it, we have evidence. Clear, documented proof of embezzlement. We have his access logs, transaction records, everything." Elena looked up at her sister. "And we also have all the background you've compiled. His real name, his previous victims, the pattern of behavior. We go to the police with a complete case, not just accusations." Mia was quiet for a moment, thinking it through. "It could work, but you're gambling with $100,000 of Dad's money. I'm gambling with my own money too. When Gavin gets access to shared accounts, he'll have access to my personal funds. I'll make sure there's enough there to be tempting, but not enough to be devastating." Elena's jaw set. "And I'll have every transaction monitored and documented." "What if he runs before we can catch him, takes the money and disappears like he did with Ashley?" "He won't. He thinks he's in control. He thinks I'm naive and in love and completely fooled." Elena's voice hardened. His arrogance is what's going to trap him." "And what if you're wrong?" Mia's voice was soft but urgent. "What if he's more dangerous than you think? What if when he realizes you've been playing him, Then I'll have you and Dad and a paper trail a mile long and law enforcement on speed dial." Elena met her sister's eyes. "Mia, I know this is risky, but we're not just protecting me anymore. We're protecting every woman Gavin would target after me, every family he'd destroy. This ends now, and it ends completely." Mia finally nodded, reluctant but convinced. "Okay, but I'm documenting every step, and the second things go sideways, we pull the emergency brake." "Deal." They spent the next hour going over details, planning for contingencies, building their case file until it was airtight. When Elena finally left, she felt the weight of what they were attempting settling over her like armor. The presentation to Richard Mercer's team happened on a Tuesday afternoon in the conference room of Mercer Industries' downtown headquarters. Elena attended at Gavin's request, playing the supportive wife while internally cataloging every detail. Gavin was impressive, she had to admit. His presentation was polished, his projections compelling, his pitch persuasive. He talked about sustainable manufacturing with enough expertise to sound credible, proposed expansion strategies that actually made sense on the surface. If Elena hadn't known the truth, she might have been proud of him. Richard's team asked hard questions. The CFO poked holes in some of the financial projections. The head of operations questioned the timeline. But Gavin handled it all smoothly, pivoting when necessary, doubling down when he sensed an opening. At the end of the presentation, Richard leaned back in his chair and studied his son-in-law with an unreadable expression. "It's an interesting proposal, Gavin. I'll be honest, there are some aspects I like and some I have concerns about." He glanced at his team. "Give us a week to review everything in detail. Then let's meet again and discuss terms." "Of course," Gavin said. "I appreciate you taking the time to consider it seriously." After the meeting, as they walked to the parking garage, Gavin was buzzing with energy. "That went well," he said. "Your dad seemed genuinely interested." "He did," Elena agreed. "Though he'll do his due diligence. That's just how he operates." "I'd expect nothing less." Gavin wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "This is really happening, Elena. We're building something together. Your family's legacy and my vision, it's perfect." Perfect, Elena thought bitterly. Like a perfect trap. That night, Mia called with an update. "I talked to a contact in the DA's office. Hypothetically speaking, if we could document active fraud or embezzlement, they'd be very interested in pursuing charges, especially with the pattern of previous behavior to establish intent." "Good. What about the creditors? Can we use that?" "Trickier. Most of the debts are through semi-legitimate channels, even if they're predatory. But the existence of the debts helps establish motive." Mia paused. Ashley also sent over copies of documents from her case. "There are some interesting parallels to how Gavin's setting things up with you." "What kind of parallels?" "The business partnership angle, the request for account access. Even some of the language he's using is similar. It's like he's running the same playbook." "Because he is," Elena said. "He found something that worked and he's repeating it. Which means we know what's coming next. After he gets the partnership with your dad approved, he'll push for immediate funding. He'll create some kind of urgency, make it seem like there's a time-sensitive opportunity that requires moving money quickly. And that's when he'll steal it." That's when he'll try to steal it," Mia corrected. "We'll be ready." The week dragged by with agonizing slowness. Gavin grew increasingly tense as he waited for Richard's decision, checking his phone constantly, jumping every time Elena's phone rang, thinking it might be her father. Elena played her part, offering reassurance and support while secretly coordinating with Mia and documenting everything. Finally, on Friday afternoon, Richard called. "Gavin, it's Richard. Do you have a minute to talk?" Elena watched her husband's face transform from anxiety to forced calm. "Of course. Let me step into my office." Gavin moved into the bedroom, closed the door. Elena couldn't hear the conversation, but she didn't need to. 20 minutes later, Gavin emerged looking triumphant. "He approved it," Gavin said, and for a moment his mask slipped entirely, revealing naked relief and greed. Then he recovered, pulling Elena into a hug. "Your dad approved the partnership. We're starting with a pilot project, $100,000 budget to develop a prototype for the new manufacturing process." "That's amazing," Elena said, hugging him back while her mind raced. $100,000, exactly what she and Mia had predicted. "There's just one thing," Gavin continued, and something in his tone made Elena's instincts prickle. "The opportunity he wants to pursue is time-sensitive. There's a potential investor interested in the prototype, but we'd need to move fast. Your dad's tied up with the board next week and traveling the week after. So he's giving me signing authority to manage the initial transfers and get the project started." There it was. The setup. The access Gavin needed to take the money and run. Elena pulled back to look at him, letting her expression show excitement mixed with just a hint of concern. "That's a lot of responsibility," she said carefully. "I know, but your dad trusts me. Trusts us." Gavin cupped her face in his hands. "This is our chance, Elena, to really build something, to prove ourselves." Prove himself, Elena thought. Prove he could steal $100,000 and disappear before anyone noticed. "When do you start?" she asked. "Monday. I'll need to set up the project accounts this weekend, get everything ready to move fast." He paused, and Elena could see him calculating his next request. Actually, remember how we talked about combining our bank accounts? This might be the perfect time to do that. For the project, I'll need to be moving money around quickly. Having access to our personal funds as backup, just in case there are any cash flow issues, would make everything smoother. And there was the second part, access to Elena's personal accounts as a safety net, or more likely, as an additional source of funds to steal. Elena pretended to think about it, letting uncertainty play across her face. I guess that makes sense, she said slowly. I just want to make sure we do it right. Maybe we should both go to the bank Monday morning? Set everything up together? Perfect, Gavin said, and the word came out too fast, too eager. That night, after Gavin fell asleep, Elena texted Mia a single word. Monday. The response came back immediately. I'll have everything ready. Police, lawyers, all of it. The moment he makes the transfer, we move. Elena lay in the darkness, listening to Gavin's steady breathing beside her, and felt the endgame crystallizing into sharp, clear focus. Monday morning, she and Gavin would go to the bank. She'd give him access to her accounts, playing the trusting wife one last time. Then he'd have everything he needed: authorization from her father, access to company funds, access to her personal accounts. And then he'd steal it all, thinking he was finally getting away with the perfect crime. But Elena would be watching, documenting, waiting for the exact moment when Gavin's greed turned into undeniable criminal action. And then the trap would spring shut, and Gavin Sterling would learn that the naive, easy-to-manage girl he'd married was the architect of his destruction. Elena smiled in the darkness and began counting down the hours until Monday. Monday morning arrived with deceptive calm, the kind of beautiful June day that made everything seem possible. Elena woke before her alarm, her mind already racing through the choreography of what was about to happen. Beside her, Gavin slept deeply, probably the best sleep he'd had in weeks now that he was so close to getting what he wanted. She studied his face in the early morning light, this man who'd shared her bed for months while planning to betray her. Even now, relaxed in sleep, he looked handsome and trustworthy. The mask was that good. Elena slipped out of bed quietly and went to the kitchen to make coffee. Her phone showed 3 messages from Mia, all sent in the last hour. Everything's in place. Detective Morrison from Financial Crimes is standing by. Dad's lawyer has the documentation ready. Are you sure you want to do this? Elena typed back, I'm sure. This ends today. She'd briefed her father 2 days ago, finally sitting him down and laying out everything she'd discovered. Richard Mercer had gone through stages of shock, fury, and then cold determination. He'd wanted to confront Gavin immediately, call the police, throw him out of the house and the company. But Elena had convinced him to wait, to let the trap play out, to catch Gavin in an act so clear that there could be no escape, no manipulation, no wiggling free through legal technicalities. Her father had agreed, but only on the condition that Elena would never be alone with Gavin once the money started moving. Mia would be tracking everything remotely, and they'd have law enforcement ready to move the second they had what they needed. Morning, beautiful. Gavin's voice came from the bedroom doorway. He looked energized, ready, like someone about to close the deal of a lifetime. Big day! Big day, Elena echoed, handing him a cup of coffee. They went to the bank at 9 o'clock. Elena had chosen a small branch of her bank, one where she knew the manager personally. Sarah Chen had handled Elena's account since college, and when Elena had called her Friday afternoon with a special request, Sarah had listened carefully and agreed to help. The process of adding Gavin to Elena's accounts was surprisingly quick. Forms to sign, identifications to verify, Sarah explaining the joint account structure with professional warmth, while her eyes kept flicking to Elena with barely concealed concern. So you'll both have full access to all funds, Sarah confirmed, looking at Elena. Any transactions, transfers, or withdrawals can be made by either of you independently. That's right, Elena said, even as everything in her screamed to stop this, to not hand over access to everything she owned. But this was necessary. Gavin needed to believe he'd won. Perfect, Gavin said, signing the final form with a flourish. This makes everything so much easier for managing the business project. They left the bank with Gavin's arm around Elena's shoulders, his mood almost giddy. He checked his phone immediately, confirming that the banking app now showed Elena's accounts under his login. "I need to head to your dad's office," he said. "Get the project account set up. Start the ball rolling on the manufacturing prototype. You okay getting home on your own?" "Of course." Elena kissed his cheek, playing her part perfectly. "Good luck. I'm so proud of you." She watched him drive away, then immediately got in her own car and called Mia. "He has access," Elena said without preamble. "I know. I'm watching the account activity in real time. Dad's IT guy set me up with monitoring access." Mia's voice was tight with tension. "The company accounts are flagged too. The second Gavin moves money, we'll know." "How long do you think before he makes his move?" "Based on the pattern with his other victims? He'll probably set everything up today, make it look legitimate. Then tomorrow or the next day, he'll make the big transfer and disappear." Elena drove to Mia's apartment where they'd set up their command center for the final phase. Her sister had 3 laptops running, each monitoring different aspects of Gavin's digital footprint: bank accounts, email, even his location via his phone's GPS. "This feels very FBI," Elena said, trying to lighten the oppressive tension in the room. "This feels very illegal," Mia corrected. "Half of what we're doing right now would never be admissible in court, which is why we need him to hang himself with legitimate transactions we can actually document." They watched the screens like hawks. At 10:30, activity started on the Mercer Industries account. Gavin was setting up the project fund, exactly as he'd said he would. $100,000 transferred from the main operating account into a new sub-account labeled Sustainable Manufacturing Prototype Sterling. "He's using his own name," Mia observed. "Bold." "He thinks it's legitimate," Elena said. "He probably plans to claim the project was real but failed, that he made good faith business decisions that just didn't pan out." Another hour passed. Elena paced while Mia worked, reaching out to Ashley Morrison and the other victims, making sure everyone was ready to provide statements when the time came. At 12:15, Gavin called Elena. "Hey babe, just wanted to let you know everything's set up on this end. The project account is live, and I've already reached out to some potential contractors." His voice was smooth, relaxed. "I might need to make some moves tomorrow on the investment side. Just giving you a heads up in case you see activity on our accounts." Our accounts. The possessive made Elena's skin crawl. "Okay," she said. "Whatever you need to do, I trust you." The lie came easily now. She'd told so many lies over the past few weeks, each one feeling more justified than the last. "I love you," Gavin said. "Love you too," Elena replied, and ended the call. Mia was watching her with an expression caught between sympathy and admiration. "You're really good at this. It's kind of scary." "I learned from the best," Elena said bitterly. "Gavin taught me how to lie with a smile." The rest of Monday passed in agonizing slowness. Gavin came home that evening in high spirits, talking about the project, about contractors he'd contacted, about the timeline for the prototype. Every word was probably a lie, every plan a fabrication designed to justify what he was about to do. Elena played the enthusiastic supporter, asking questions, offering encouragement, all while the secret knowledge of what was coming burned in her chest like acid. Tuesday morning, Elena woke to find Gavin already up and dressed, working on his laptop at the kitchen table. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep. Too excited about getting things moving today." He glanced at her, and something in his expression made Elena's instincts prickle. "I've been thinking about the timeline. The investor I mentioned, the one interested in the prototype, they're only in town until Thursday. If we want to lock down their funding, I need to show real progress fast." "What does that mean?" "It means I need to move quickly on securing materials and contractors, which means transferring the project funds to the operational account I've set up." Gavin's voice was casual, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders. "It's a bigger amount than I initially thought. The suppliers want payment up front, so I might need to supplement the company money with some of our personal funds temporarily, just as a bridge until the investor money comes through." And there it was, the setup for the theft. "How much are we talking?" Elena asked, keeping her voice innocently curious. "Maybe 30, 40,000 from our accounts. It'll all come back within a week when the deal closes." Liar. There was no investor, no deal. Just Gavin planning to drain every account he could access and run. "If you think it's the right move," Elena said slowly, "then okay. I trust your judgment on this." Relief washed over Gavin's face. "Thank you. I know it's a lot, but I promise this is going to pay off big for us." He went back to his laptop, and Elena excused herself to the bathroom where she immediately texted Mia. "He's going to move money today, maybe within the hour. I'm ready. Dad's ready. Police are standing by. The second he makes an unauthorized transfer, we move." Elena took a deep breath, steadied herself, and went back out to play her role a little longer. At 9:45, Gavin stood up from the table. "I need to head to the office to finalize some paperwork," he said, kissing Elena on the forehead. "I'll probably be there most of the day. Don't wait up for dinner if I'm running late." "Okay, good luck with everything." She watched him leave, counted to 30, then grabbed her keys and drove straight to Mia's apartment. Her sister was already tracking Gavin's location. His phone showed him driving toward downtown, but he wasn't heading to Mercer Industries' office. Instead, he was going to a different part of the city entirely. "Where's he going?" Elena asked. "Let me check." Mia pulled up a map, cross-referenced the address. "It's a FedEx office, one with private mailboxes and international shipping." "He's setting up his escape route," Elena said, her stomach sinking. "Somewhere to forward documents, maybe receive new identification. Or ship money," Mia added grimly. They watched as Gavin spent 40 minutes at the FedEx location, then drove to a different bank. Not Elena's bank, but a national chain where he probably had his own accounts set up. At 11:30, the first transfer hit. Mia's laptop pinged with an alert. $50,000 had just moved from the Mercer Industries project account into an account at First National Bank, account holder Gavin Sterling. "That's embezzlement," Mia said, her fingers flying across the keyboard to screenshot and document everything. "He just stole $50,000 from Dad's company." "Keep watching," Elena said, her heart pounding. "He's not done." She was right. Over the next 20 minutes, 3 more transfers occurred. $20,000 from Elena's personal savings account, $15,000 from her checking account, and another $25,000 from the Mercer Industries account, this time labeled as contractor payment, but going to the same personal account Gavin controlled. In less than half an hour, Gavin had stolen $110,000. "Call Dad," Elena said, "and call Detective Morrison. We have him." While Mia made the calls, Elena watched the tracking map. Gavin was on the move again, this time heading toward the airport. He was running. Right now, in real time, Gavin was executing his exit plan. Elena felt a surge of cold fury mixed with vindication. This was it. The proof they needed, the crime in progress, everything documented and irrefutable. "Dad's on his way to the police station," Mia said, ending her call. "Detective Morrison is issuing a warrant right now. They're sending units to intercept Gavin before he can leave the city." "I want to be there," Elena said. "When they arrest him. I want to see his face." Mia looked at her sister, saw the steel in her expression, and nodded. "Let's go." They drove downtown to the Financial Crimes Division, where Richard Mercer was already in a conference room with Detective Morrison and 2 other officers. When Elena walked in, her father stood and pulled her into a tight hug. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I didn't see what he was. I'm sorry I welcomed him into our family." "You couldn't have known," Elena said. "He's good at this. That's what makes him dangerous." Detective Morrison was a woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. She shook Elena's hand firmly. "We've reviewed the documentation your sister provided," she said. "Combined with the real-time transfers we've been monitoring, we have more than enough for arrest and prosecution. The question is whether we pick him up now or wait until he's actually at the airport." "Now," Elena said immediately. "Don't give him any more time to move money or cover his tracks." "Agreed." Morrison pulled out her radio. "Units are already en route to his location. He's currently at a coffee shop near the financial district, probably making final arrangements before heading to the airport." They waited in tense silence. Elena couldn't sit still, pacing the length of the conference room while Mia tracked Gavin's phone, and her father spoke in low tones with the detective about next steps in the prosecution. At 12:40, Morrison's radio crackled to life. "Target acquired. Moving in now." Elena's breath caught. Somewhere across the city, police were surrounding the man who'd stood at an altar and promised to love her forever, the man who'd been planning to rob her blind and disappear. "Subject is in custody," the radio announced. "No resistance. We're bringing him in." A strange feeling washed over Elena. Not quite relief, not quite satisfaction. Something more complex and darker. The feeling of a trap finally springing shut after months of careful planning. "They're bringing him here?" she asked Morrison. "To the station for booking and questioning. You don't have to see him if you don't want to." "I want to," Elena said firmly. 45 minutes later, she watched through a one-way mirror as two officers escorted Gavin Sterling into an interrogation room. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The confidence and charm had evaporated, replaced by barely concealed panic. His eyes darted around the room, clearly calculating options, looking for exits. Elena stood next to her father and sister, watching the man she'd married sit down at a metal table and realize his perfect plan had fallen apart. Detective Morrison entered the interrogation room with a folder full of documents. "Mr. Sterling," she said, sitting down across from him. "Or should I say, Mr. Morrison? I understand you've used both names." Gavin's face went carefully blank. "I want a lawyer." "That's your right, but I think you should know what we have before you make that call." Morrison opened the folder. Multiple counts of embezzlement from Mercer Industries, unauthorized transfer of funds from your wife's personal accounts, wire fraud. And that's just today's crimes. We're also looking at your history, the civil suits, the previous victims, the pattern of financial fraud going back almost a decade. "I don't know what you're talking about," Gavin said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We have transaction records," Morrison continued calmly, "time-stamped, documented transfers from accounts you weren't authorized to access. We have statements from previous victims detailing your pattern of behavior. We have evidence that you lied about your identity, your history, your intentions. We have everything, Mr. Sterling." Gavin's jaw worked as he processed this. Elena could see the moment he understood the trap he'd walked into, the realization that this wasn't just about today's transfers, but about every crime he'd committed over the years. "How?" he asked quietly. "Your wife is smarter than you gave her credit for," Morrison said. "A lot smarter." Gavin's head snapped up. "Elena knows? This was a setup," Morrison confirmed. "From the moment you thought you were manipulating her into giving you access to her accounts, she was documenting everything, building a case, waiting for you to hang yourself." Elena watched the emotions play across Gavin's face. Shock, disbelief, fury, and finally something that might have been grudging respect. "I want to see her," he said suddenly. "I want to talk to Elena." "Not going to happen," Morrison said. "Please?" Gavin's voice took on a desperate edge. "Just 5 minutes. Let me explain." In the observation room, Elena felt her father's hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this," Richard said. "You don't owe him anything." But Elena found herself moving toward the door. "I want to. I need to." Mia grabbed her arm. "Elena, no. He's manipulative. He'll try to get in your head." "Let him try." Elena's voice was steady. "I know exactly who he is now. He can't hurt me anymore." Detective Morrison met her in the hallway, expression skeptical. "Are you sure about this?" 5 minutes, Elena said. "I want to look him in the eye." Morrison escorted her into the interrogation room. The moment Gavin saw Elena, he stood up, and the officers moved to restrain him, but Morrison waved them off. Elena sat down across from her husband, though not for much longer, and met his gaze without flinching. "Hello, Gavin." "Elena." His voice cracked slightly on her name. "I can explain all of this." "Can you?" Elena's tone was conversational, almost curious. "Can you explain how you lied to me for 14 months? How you married me as part of a con? How you planned to steal from my family and ruin my life?" "It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that." Elena leaned forward. "I heard you, Gavin. At the wedding, through that door. I heard every word you said to your friends about me being naive and easy to manage, about your exit timeline, about using me to get to my father's money." The color drained from Gavin's face. You knew? All this time?" All this time, Elena confirmed. Every moment you thought you were playing me, I was playing you right back. Every smile, every kiss, every time I said I trusted you, I was setting a trap. And you walked right into it. Gavin stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Why not just divorce me? Why go through all this? Because you've done this before. Elena's voice hardened. Ashley Morrison, Maria Chen, Jennifer Walsh. Should I keep going? You've been destroying women's lives for years, and every time you got away with it because there wasn't enough proof or because you'd disappear before anyone could build a case. She pulled out her phone, showed him a photo. It was a screenshot of him at the FedEx office that morning. This time, there's proof of everything. Every transfer, every lie, every crime documented and witnessed. You're not walking away from this, Gavin. You're not changing your name and moving to a new city to find a new victim. This ends here. You don't understand, Gavin said desperately. I was in trouble. I owed people money, dangerous people. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. You chose to hurt people instead of facing your problems honestly. You chose to see me as a mark instead of a person. Elena stood up. And now you're going to face the consequences. Elena, please. Gavin reached across the table, and the officers moved in, but Elena didn't flinch. I did care about you. That part was real. No, it wasn't. Elena's voice was quiet, but certain. You don't destroy someone you care about. You don't plan their financial ruin while kissing them goodnight. What you felt for me was greed, Gavin, not love. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and one more thing. Those creditors you're so afraid of, Dominic Volkov and the others? She allowed herself a small, cold smile. Detective Morrison has already contacted them as part of the investigation. They know you're in custody. They know you're not going to be able to pay them back. So even if you somehow got out of this, which you won't, you'd still have to answer to them. The look of absolute defeat that crossed Gavin's face was the most genuine expression Elena had seen from him in months. She walked out of the interrogation room and didn't look back. In the hallway, her father was waiting. Richard Mercer pulled his daughter into a tight embrace. I'm so proud of you, he said, and I'm so sorry you had to go through any of this. It's over now, Elena said, and felt the truth of those words settle into her bones. Over the next several days, the case against Gavin Sterling, born Gavin Christopher Morrison, came together with devastating completeness. The transfers he'd made that Tuesday morning were just the beginning. Detective Morrison's team uncovered additional evidence of wire fraud, identity fraud, and fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Ashley Morrison and the other victims provided detailed statements about Gavin's pattern of behavior, establishing him as a serial offender. The creditors Gavin owed money to were less forgiving than the legal system. Within 48 hours of his arrest, Dominic Volkov filed a civil suit for the outstanding debt plus interest. Other lenders followed suit. Even if Gavin somehow avoided significant jail time, his financial future was destroyed. Gavin's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, claiming his client had been under duress from loan sharks and had made poor decisions out of desperation rather than malice. The prosecutor, armed with Elena's documentation and the testimony of multiple victims, rejected every offer. He's a predator, the prosecutor told Elena during a meeting to prepare for trial. He systematically targeted vulnerable women, gained their trust, and robbed them. The fact that he used charm instead of violence doesn't make him less dangerous. Caleb and Noah, the groomsmen who'd been present for Gavin's confession at the wedding, came forward voluntarily. Both were racked with guilt about not warning Elena sooner. Noah showed up at Elena's apartment one evening, looking haunted. I should have told you, he said when she opened the door. At the reception, I tried to say something, but I was a coward. I'm so sorry. You're here now, Elena said, and your testimony is going to help put him away. That's what matters. He fooled all of us, Noah said quietly. Made us think he was just ambitious, maybe a little morally flexible, but not this. That's what he does, Elena said. He makes you doubt your own instincts, makes you think you're overreacting or being paranoid. Noah left promising to provide whatever statement the prosecution needed. Caleb did the same, his lawyer in tow. both of them looking relieved to finally unburden themselves of the secret they'd been carrying. The divorce papers Elena filed were almost anticlimactic compared to the criminal charges. Her lawyer assured her that given the circumstances, fraud, criminal activity, deception, the annulment would be swift and complete. Gavin would have no claim to any of Elena's assets or her family's business. It'll be like the marriage never happened, the lawyer said. But that wasn't quite true, Elena thought. The marriage had happened. The betrayal had happened. She'd been changed by it, fundamentally and permanently, just not in the way Gavin had intended. 6 weeks after Gavin's arrest, Elena sat in a courtroom for his arraignment. He was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking nothing like the polished businessman who'd proposed to her on a beach. The confident charm had completely evaporated, replaced by the reality of a man facing multiple felony charges with a mountain of evidence against him. The judge reviewed the charges: embezzlement, wire fraud, identity fraud, theft by deception. Gavin's lawyer entered a plea of not guilty, but even he looked like he knew it was a losing battle. Bail was set at $250,000, an amount Gavin couldn't possibly make. He was remanded to custody pending trial. As they led him out of the courtroom, Gavin's eyes found Elena in the gallery. She held his gaze steadily, letting him see that she felt no pity, no regret, no softness that he could exploit. She'd won, completely and utterly. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. The story had broken in the local news. A Cinderella tale turned nightmare. A con man who'd infiltrated a prominent local family only to be caught by the bride he'd underestimated. Elena's lawyer fielded most of the questions, but one reporter managed to push through the crowd. "Mrs. Sterling, Ms. Mercer, how do you feel about your husband's arrest?" Elena paused, considering her words carefully. "I feel relieved," she said finally. "Relieved that he can't hurt anyone else. Relieved that justice is being served. And relieved that I trusted my instincts when I knew something was wrong." "Do you have any advice for other women who might be in similar situations?" "Trust yourself," Elena said firmly. "If something feels wrong, investigate. Document everything. And know that you're stronger than anyone who tries to manipulate you gives you credit for." She walked away from the cameras with her head high, flanked by her father and Mia, and felt a chapter of her life finally, definitively close. The trial was scheduled for 4 months later. In the meantime, Elena focused on rebuilding. She moved out of the apartment she'd shared with Gavin, found a new place that had no memories of him. She went back to work at a nonprofit she'd been involved with before the wedding, throwing herself into projects that actually mattered. And slowly, carefully, she started to heal. Mia remained her constant support, calling daily, showing up with wine and takeout whenever Elena seemed to be struggling. Her parents were careful not to smother her, but their love and support were steady and unwavering. "I'm proud of how you handled this," her mother said one evening over dinner. "You could have fallen apart. Instead, you fought back." "I learned from you," Elena said. "You taught me to be strong." "I taught you to be kind," her mother corrected. "You decided to be strong on your own." The trial, when it finally happened, was swift and decisive. The evidence was overwhelming. Transaction records, testimony from victims, recorded conversations, everything Elena and Mia had compiled over months of investigation. Gavin's defense tried to paint him as a man who'd made mistakes under extreme pressure from dangerous creditors, but the pattern of behavior going back years demolished that narrative. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It was a career. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Elena was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. She watched Gavin's face crumble as each count was announced, watched the last remnants of his mask finally disintegrate. The sentencing happened 3 weeks later. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s who'd clearly read every detail of the case. "Mr. Morrison," she said, using his birth name deliberately, "you have demonstrated a pattern of predatory behavior that shows not only criminal intent, but a fundamental lack of respect for the law and for other human beings. You targeted vulnerable individuals, exploited their trust, and caused significant financial and emotional harm." She sentenced him to 12 years in prison with possibility of parole after 8. Additional restitution orders were issued for all the victims, though everyone knew Gavin had no way to pay them. As they led him away, Gavin looked at Elena one last time. She couldn't read his expression. Regret, maybe, or just disappointment that his con had finally failed. She didn't care which it was. Outside the courthouse, the sun was shining. Elena stood on the steps, breathing in air that tasted like freedom and vindication and the promise of new beginnings. Ashley Morrison was waiting near the entrance. She approached Elena tentatively. "Thank you," Ashley said simply, "for stopping him, for making sure he couldn't do this to anyone else." "Thank you for being willing to testify," Elena replied. "Your courage made this possible." They hugged. Two women bound by the same predator, both finally free of him. As Elena drove home that afternoon, she thought about the woman she'd been on her wedding day. Naive enough to believe love was always genuine, trusting enough to miss the signs of deception. That woman was gone, transformed by betrayal into someone harder, clearer, more careful, but also stronger. So much stronger. The marriage to Gavin Sterling had been a lie from start to finish, but Elena's revenge, patient, strategic, absolutely devastating, had been real. And it was finally, completely over. The finality of Gavin's sentencing should have brought immediate peace, but Elena discovered that healing was a slower, more complicated process than she'd anticipated. The courtroom victory had been satisfying in the moment, watching justice served and a predator removed from circulation. But in the weeks that followed, as the adrenaline of the trial faded and media attention moved on to other stories, Elena found herself confronting the emotional wreckage that remained. She'd spent so many months in survival mode, gathering evidence, setting traps, playing a part, that she hadn't fully processed the betrayal itself. Now, with Gavin safely behind bars and the divorce finalized, there was nothing left to distract her from the simple, painful truth that the man she'd loved had never existed at all. Mia found her one evening sitting in her new apartment, staring at the wedding album she'd been about to throw away. "You kept it?" Mia asked, sitting down beside her sister. "I don't know why." Elena flipped through pages of photographs that now felt like evidence from a crime scene. "Look at these pictures. I look so happy, so completely clueless." "You weren't clueless. You were trusting. There's a difference." "Is there?" Elena closed the album with more force than necessary. "I missed every red flag, Mia. The phone calls he took in private, the vague explanations about his past, the way he always steered conversations away from anything too personal. I saw all of it and explained it away. Because you loved him. Or you loved who you thought he was." Mia took the album from Elena's hands. "And he was very, very good at being that person. That's not your failure. That's his crime." Elena knew her sister was right intellectually, but emotionally she still struggled with feeling like she should have known, should have seen through the performance sooner. Her therapist, a recommendation from Ashley Morrison, who'd been seeing one for years, said the same thing in their sessions. "You're grieving," Dr. Patricia Winters explained during one of their meetings. "Not just the relationship, but the future you thought you were building. The trust you had in your own judgment. The innocence of believing people are who they present themselves to be. Those are real losses, Elena. They deserve to be mourned." "I don't want to mourn him," Elena said. "He doesn't deserve my tears." "You're not mourning him. You're mourning what he took from you." That distinction helped, slightly. Elena allowed herself to feel the anger and the grief without letting it consume her. She threw herself into work with the nonprofit, channeling her energy into causes that mattered. She reconnected with friends she'd neglected during the intense months of wedding planning and evidence gathering. And slowly, incrementally, she began to feel like herself again. Not the same self she'd been before Gavin, that version was gone forever, but a new self. Harder in some ways, more cautious, but also more confident in her own strength. 6 months after the trial, Elena received an unexpected phone call from the prosecutor's office. Detective Morrison wanted to meet with her about something that had come up during Gavin's incarceration. Elena drove to the police station with Mia, both of them curious and slightly anxious about what this could be about. Detective Morrison greeted them with her usual no-nonsense professionalism, but there was something different in her expression, almost excitement. "We got a break in a cold case," she said without preamble, leading them to her office. 3 years ago, a woman named Rebecca Chen filed a missing persons report for her sister, Lily. Lily had been dating a man she met online, told her family she was getting serious with him, then disappeared. No contact, no trace, nothing. Elena felt her stomach drop. You think Gavin was involved? We know he was involved. Lily's sister provided us with photos, and it's definitely him, though he was using a different name then, Tyler Morrison. Morrison pulled out a file. Here's where it gets interesting. Lily didn't just disappear. She emptied her bank accounts first, about $90,000, and transferred it all to an account we've now traced to Gavin. He made her disappear, Mia said, her voice tight. We don't think he hurt her physically. Our theory is he convinced her to run away with him, helped her liquidate everything, and then abandoned her somewhere far from home. We've been working with the FBI, and we think we've found her. Elena's breath caught. She's alive? Living in Portland under a different name, working as a waitress. Hasn't contacted her family in 3 years because she's ashamed of what happened. She thinks she ran away of her own free will and made terrible choices. Morrison's expression hardened. She doesn't realize she was manipulated by a professional con artist. She doesn't know about his pattern of behavior or the other victims. Can we help? Elena asked immediately. Can we talk to her? That's why I called you. I think hearing from you, from someone who went through something similar but fought back, might help her understand that what happened wasn't her fault, and it might give her the courage to come forward and testify. Testify about what? He's already in prison. For your case and the charges we could prove, but if Lily's willing to press charges for what he did to her, we can add time to his sentence, and more importantly, we can help her get some justice and closure. Morrison leaned forward. I know this is a lot to ask. You've already been through so much, but I think you could make a real difference here. Elena didn't hesitate. I'll do it. Whatever she needs. 2 weeks later, Elena flew to Portland with Detective Morrison. They met Lily Chen in a quiet coffee shop in a neighborhood that looked like it specialized in fresh starts and anonymity. Lily was 28 but looked younger, with delicate features and eyes that held a deep wariness. She was clearly nervous about this meeting, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup like it was an anchor. I don't understand what you want from me, Lily said after the introductions were made. I made my own choices. I'm the one who gave him my money and followed him to Seattle and believed all his lies. You're not the only one, Elena said gently. Can I tell you a story? She walked Lily through her own experience, the wedding, the overheard conversation, the months of investigation, the trap she'd set. Lily listened with growing disbelief and something that looked like relief. There were others? Lily asked when Elena finished. At least 6 women that we know of. You, me, his ex-wife Ashley, 3 others who filed civil suits, probably more who never came forward. Elena pulled out her phone, showed Lily photographs of documents from the trial. He's a professional, Lily. This is what he does. He finds women, makes them fall in love, takes everything he can, and disappears. But I was so stupid, Lily whispered. I believed everything. When he said we should start fresh somewhere new, I thought it was romantic. When he said I should pull out all my savings so we could buy a house together, I just did it. I never questioned anything. Because he's very good at making you not question, Elena said. That's the skill. That's what makes him dangerous. It's not your fault that you trusted someone you loved. Lily's eyes filled with tears. I haven't talked to my family in 3 years. I was too ashamed to tell them I'd been abandoned in a strange city with no money, sleeping in my car until I could find work. I thought they'd say I told you so, that they'd judge me for being so naive. They've been looking for you, Detective Morrison said quietly. Your sister Rebecca filed a missing persons report. She's been searching for you this whole time. The sob that broke from Lily was raw and painful. Elena reached across the table, took her hand. You can come home, Elena said. You can reconnect with your family and rebuild your life, and you can help make sure Gavin pays for what he did to you. Will it change anything? You said he's already in prison. It'll add to his sentence, and more than that, it'll give you your power back. Elena squeezed Lily's hand. I promise you, there's nothing more satisfying than looking your abuser in the eye and telling them they didn't break you, that they didn't win. Lily pressed charges that afternoon. Detective Morrison arranged for her to reunite with her family, and Elena stayed in Portland long enough to see Rebecca Chen embrace the sister she'd been searching for, both of them crying and laughing and holding on like they'd never let go. "Thank you," Rebecca said to Elena before she left. "Thank you for helping her understand it wasn't her fault." "She helped me too," Elena said honestly. "Knowing there are other survivors, knowing we all came out the other side, it helps." Flying home, Elena felt something shift inside her. The work of stopping Gavin wasn't just about her revenge anymore. It had become about protecting other women, helping other victims, making sure the cycle of predatory behavior actually ended. She started to get calls from Ashley Morrison and the other victims. They'd formed a loose support network, checking in on each other, sharing resources. Someone suggested they start a formal organization, a group dedicated to helping victims of romance scams and financial fraud in relationships. Elena threw herself into the project. They called it Trust Yourself Foundation, and within 6 months they had a website, a hotline, and a small staff of volunteers who provided support and resources to people who suspected they might be in manipulative relationships. "You've turned something terrible into something meaningful," her mother said one evening over dinner at her parents' house. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." "It feels good to help," Elena admitted. "Every time someone calls the hotline and we can give them information or resources or just validation that their instincts are right, it feels like we're preventing another Gavin." Her father raised his wine glass to Elena, who proved that strength isn't about never being hurt. It's about how you respond when you are. They toasted, and Elena felt the warmth of her family's support washing over her. This was real love, she thought. Unconditional, supportive, honest. The contrast with what Gavin had offered, the manipulation disguised as affection, couldn't have been starker. A year after Gavin's sentencing, Elena was scheduled to speak at a conference on financial fraud in relationships. She was nervous about public speaking, but the organizers had been insistent that her story would help other victims understand they weren't alone. Backstage, before her presentation, she ran into someone she didn't expect to see. Ethan Hale was a lawyer specializing in consumer protection and fraud cases. Elena had met him briefly during the trial when he'd offered pro bono assistance to one of Gavin's victims who couldn't afford representation. She remembered thinking he was kind, competent, and refreshingly straightforward. "Elena Mercer," he said with a smile. "I didn't know you were speaking today." "Last-minute addition. Someone canceled and they asked if I'd fill in." She gestured to the conference program. "You're on the panel about legal remedies for fraud victims?" Trying to be useful, he paused, seemed to consider something, then continued. "I've been following the work you're doing with Trust Yourself Foundation. It's impressive. Really impressive." "Thank you. We're trying to make a difference." "You are." "I've referred 3 clients to your hotline in the past 2 months. They all said talking to someone who understood what they were going through was invaluable." They talked for a few more minutes about the conference, about their respective work, about the challenges of helping fraud victims navigate both legal and emotional recovery. Ethan was easy to talk to, Elena noticed. He listened more than he spoke, asked thoughtful questions, didn't try to dominate the conversation. When it was time for her presentation, he wished her luck and promised to attend if his panel timing allowed. Elena walked onto the stage and looked out at a room full of people, lawyers, advocates, victims, law enforcement, all gathered to address a problem that affected thousands of people every year. She took a deep breath and began her story. She told them about falling in love, about the wedding, about overhearing the conversation that changed everything. She described the months of investigation, the evidence gathering, the trap she'd set, and she talked about the aftermath, the grief, the healing, the decision to turn her experience into something that could help others. "The thing about being conned," Elena said, "is that it makes you question everything. Your judgment, your instincts, your ability to trust. For a long time, I thought Gavin had broken something fundamental inside me, that I'd never be able to trust anyone again, including myself." She paused, looking out at the faces in the audience. Some were nodding, clearly relating to what she was saying. "But I've learned that trust isn't the problem. The problem is people who weaponize trust, who see vulnerability as opportunity rather than a gift." Elena's voice strengthened. "We shouldn't have to become cynical or suspicious to protect ourselves. We should be able to exist in the world with open hearts, and expect that people will treat us with honesty and respect. And when they don't, when they choose to manipulate and deceive, that's their failure, not ours. The applause when she finished was thunderous. People stood, and Elena felt tears prick her eyes at the recognition that her story had resonated, had helped, had mattered. Afterward, dozens of people approached her wanting to share their own experiences or thank her for speaking. Ethan was among them, waiting patiently until the crowd thinned. "That was powerful," he said simply. "Thank you for being willing to share something so personal. Thank you for listening." Elena felt suddenly exhausted, the emotional weight of reliving her story catching up with her. "Can I buy you coffee?" Ethan asked. "Not networking, not business, just coffee with someone who thinks you're remarkable." Elena's first instinct was to say no, to keep her walls up, to protect herself from any potential complications. But then she looked at Ethan, really looked at him, and saw only genuine interest and respect. No agenda, no manipulation, just a straightforward invitation. "Coffee sounds nice," she said. They went to a quiet cafe near the conference center and talked for 2 hours. Ethan told her about his work, about his family, about the uncle whose financial exploitation by a caretaker had inspired him to specialize in fraud law. Elena shared more about the foundation, about her plans to expand their services, about the delicate balance of helping people without traumatizing them further. "You're rebuilding trust," Ethan observed, "not just for the people you help, but for yourself." "Is it that obvious?" "Only because I recognize it. I went through something similar after a bad relationship in law school. Different circumstances, but the same betrayal of trust." He smiled ruefully. "Took me years to believe people could be genuine again. And now? Now I take people at face value until they prove otherwise. I don't assume everyone's lying, but I also don't ignore red flags. It's a balance." Elena appreciated his honesty, the way he didn't pretend to have all the answers or try to fix her with platitudes. Over the next several months, she and Ethan stayed in touch. Coffee meetings turned into dinners. Dinners turned into long walks where they talked about everything and nothing. He never pushed, never rushed, never made her feel like she needed to be anywhere other than exactly where she was in her healing process. "I like spending time with you," he said one evening as they walked through a park near Elena's apartment. "But I want to be clear about something. I'm not trying to fix you or save you or sweep you off your feet. You don't need saving. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met." "Then what are you trying to do?" Elena asked, curious rather than defensive. "Just be honest. Be consistent. Be someone you can trust to mean what I say and say what I mean." Ethan stopped walking, turned to face her. "If that's something you're interested in, great. If you need more time or more space, or if you're not ready for anything beyond friendship, that's great too. I'm not going anywhere." It was the least romantic and most reassuring thing anyone had ever said to her. "I think I'd like to try," Elena said carefully. "Slowly, with clear communication and no assumptions." "Slowly with clear communication sounds perfect to me." They dated for nearly 2 years before Ethan proposed, and when he did, it was nothing like Gavin's elaborate beach proposal. They were having dinner at her apartment, discussing whether to adopt a dog, when Ethan suddenly got very quiet. "What?" Elena asked, noticing the shift in his mood. "I've been thinking about something," he said, "and I want to talk about it, but I'm nervous because I know the last time someone asked you this question, it was part of a con." Elena's heart started beating faster. "Okay." "I love you, Elena. I love your strength and your compassion and the way you've turned something terrible into something meaningful. I love how you trust yourself again, and I love that you've chosen to trust me." Ethan reached across the table, took her hand. "I want to spend my life with you. Not because it benefits me financially or socially, not because you come from a wealthy family, but because you make me want to be better. Because being with you feels like coming home." He pulled out a simple ring, elegant but understated, nothing like the ostentatious diamond Gavin had given her. "This isn't a grand gesture or a fairy tale moment," Ethan continued. "It's just an honest question from someone who loves you. Will you marry me?" Elena looked at this man who'd proven his consistency over 2 years of honest communication, who'd respected her boundaries and earned her trust incrementally through 1,000 small actions, and felt certain in a way she'd never felt with Gavin. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." They planned a small wedding, nothing like the lavish ceremony Elena had endured with Gavin, just close family and friends, simple vows, honest promises made in a garden that belonged to Ethan's grandmother. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Elena felt a moment of anxiety, a flashback to her first wedding, to standing at an altar while hiding the knowledge of betrayal. But Ethan squeezed her hand and the moment passed. Their vows were not poetry. They were practical promises about communication and honesty and showing up for each other even when things were hard. "I promise to always tell you the truth even when it's uncomfortable," Ethan said. "I promise to respect your independence and support your work. I promise that what you see is what you get. No hidden agendas, no secret plans, just me trying my best every day to be worthy of your trust." Elena's vows were equally straightforward. "I promise to trust you while also trusting myself. I promise to communicate clearly about what I need and what I'm feeling. I promise that I'm choosing you freely, with full knowledge of who you are, and that I'll keep choosing you every day." Mia cried through the entire ceremony. Their mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Even Richard Mercer looked misty as he watched his daughter marry someone who genuinely deserved her. At the reception, small and intimate, held at the same garden, Elena found herself standing with Mia and Ashley Morrison, who'd become close friends in the years since Gavin's trial. "You did it," Ashley said, raising her champagne glass. "You got your happy ending." "We all did," Elena corrected. "You started your own business. Mia made partner at her law firm. Lily reconnected with her family and went back to school. We all survived and rebuilt." "To surviving," Mia said. "To thriving," Elena amended. They clinked glasses, three women bound by shared trauma but defined by their resilience. Years passed. Elena and Ethan built a life together that was comfortable rather than dramatic, honest rather than exciting in the fairy tale sense. They had arguments sometimes, moments of frustration or misunderstanding, but they worked through them with communication rather than manipulation. Trust yourself. Foundation grew beyond what Elena had imagined. They helped hundreds of people escape or avoid romance scams, provided resources and support, even worked with law enforcement to identify and prosecute other predators like Gavin. Speaking of Gavin, Elena rarely thought about him anymore. He'd become part of her history rather than a defining trauma, something that happened to her once but didn't control her present or future. Then, 8 years after his sentencing, she received notification that he was up for parole. The letter included information about the hearing and an invitation for victims to provide impact statements. Elena sat at her kitchen table reading the notice, and Ethan came up behind her, rested a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to go," he said quietly. "You don't owe him anything." "I know." Elena reread the date. "But I think I want to. Not for him, for me." The parole hearing was held in a sterile conference room at the state prison. Elena arrived with Ethan and Mia, prepared to face the man who tried to destroy her life. Gavin was led in wearing prison whites, and the change in him was striking. He looked older, worn down, the polished charm completely eroded. His hair was graying at the temples, his posture defeated rather than confident. When his eyes met Elena's, something complicated passed across his expression. Regret, maybe. Or just embarrassment at being seen like this by someone who'd once looked at him with love. The parole board reviewed his case, his behavior in prison, his completion of various programs. Then they asked if the victims present wanted to make statements. Elena stood. 8 years ago, she said, her voice steady, Gavin Morrison married me as part of a calculated plan to steal from me and my family. He lied about who he was, what he wanted, and what our future would be. He saw me as a mark, a target, a means to an end. Gavin stared at the table, not meeting her eyes. For a long time I carried anger about that, about the betrayal, about the time I wasted, about the innocence I lost when I learned that someone could look at me with apparent love while planning my destruction. Elena paused. But I don't carry that anger anymore. Not because I've forgiven him. I haven't, and I never will. but because I've built a life so full and meaningful that his betrayal is just a footnote in my story rather than the main chapter. She looked directly at Gavin now, willing him to meet her eyes. He finally did, and she saw the full weight of his defeat reflected there. I've helped dozens of women avoid men like you. I've built an organization that protects people from predators. I've married someone who respects me as an equal partner. And I've learned that my strength doesn't come from never being hurt. It comes from how I responded when I was. Elena took a breath, preparing for her final statement. As for whether Gavin Morrison should be granted parole, I'll leave that to this board's judgment. But I want to be clear about something. If he's released, he will be monitored. Every romantic relationship, every business dealing, every financial transaction will be watched by people who know his pattern. The victims he hurt are connected now. We talk, we share information, we protect each other and the community. He won't get away with this again. She sat down, and Ethan took her hand, squeezed it gently. Two other victims spoke, Ashley and Lily, both of them having traveled to attend the hearing. Their statements were equally powerful, equally clear about the damage Gavin had caused, and their determination that he never hurt anyone else. The parole board deliberated for 30 minutes before returning with their decision. Parole denied. Gavin would serve at least 3 more years before his next hearing. Outside the prison, Elena breathed in the fresh air and felt the satisfaction of closure. Not because Gavin was still in prison, though that felt just, but because she'd faced him without fear, without anger, without giving him any power over her emotional state. "How do you feel?" Ethan asked as they walked to the car. "Free," Elena said simply, "completely free." That evening, back home in the life she'd built, Elena stood in her kitchen making dinner while Ethan worked at the table and their dog. They'd eventually gotten that dog they'd discussed, dozed on the couch. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening, quiet and unremarkable. And it was perfect. The doorbell rang, and Elena answered it to find a young woman, maybe 25, looking nervous and uncertain. "I'm sorry to just show up," the woman said, "but I got your address from the foundation website. I'm Sarah. I think I'm dating someone who I think he might be lying to me. About everything." Elena recognized the fear and confusion in Sarah's eyes. She'd worn that same expression once, standing in a different doorway, about to learn that the life she thought she had was built on deception. "Come in," Elena said warmly. "Let's talk." She settled Sarah at the kitchen table, made tea, and listened as the young woman described a relationship that had all the hallmarks of a con, too good to be true, moving too fast, subtle requests for money disguised as romantic gestures. "I feel so stupid," Sarah said, echoing words Elena had heard from dozens of victims. "Everyone says I'm being paranoid, but something just feels wrong." "Your instincts are trying to protect you," Elena said. "And the fact that you're here, asking questions, trusting yourself enough to investigate, that's not stupid. That's incredibly smart." Over the next hour, Elena walked Sarah through how to document suspicious behavior, how to verify information, how to protect her assets while gathering evidence. She gave her the foundation's resources, contact information for lawyers and investigators, and most importantly, validation that her concerns were legitimate. "You're not crazy," Elena said as Sarah was leaving, "and you're not alone. Whatever you discover about this man, whatever you decide to do, will help you." After Sarah left, Ethan looked at Elena with an expression of quiet admiration. "You're amazing," he said. "You know that? I'm just someone who learned hard lessons and decided to make them useful. You're someone who turned betrayal into purpose, who used pain to help others. That's extraordinary, Elena." She kissed him, this man who'd proven that love could be honest and steady and real. Then she went back to making dinner, to living the ordinary, beautiful life she'd rebuilt from the ashes of Gavin's destruction. Years later, when people asked Elena about her first marriage, she had a standard response ready. "I married a liar once," she'd say calmly. "He thought I was weak and naive. He thought he could use me and discard me and move on to his next victim. He was wrong about all of it." Then she'd smile, the kind of smile that held both hard-won wisdom and genuine happiness. "The thing about being underestimated," she'd continue, "is that it gives you the element of surprise. Gavin Sterling never saw me coming. By the time he realized I knew the truth, the trap was already set. He walked right into it, and he never walked back out. It was the truth, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was more complex, encompassing not just the revenge, but the healing, not just the victory, but the rebuilding, not just the trap she'd set for Gavin, but the life she'd built after. The whole truth was that Elena Mercer had been broken by betrayal and had chosen to become stronger at the broken places. She'd been manipulated and had learned to trust herself completely. She'd been used as a mark and had transformed into a protector of others. She'd walked down an aisle toward a man planning to destroy her and had turned that wedding into the first step of his complete downfall. And then, years later, she'd walked down another aisle toward a man who loved her honestly, who saw her clearly, who promised her nothing but truth and gave her exactly that every single day. Both weddings were part of her story, but only one was part of her happy ending. And that Elena thought as she looked at her life. The foundation that helped people, the husband who respected her, the community of survivors she'd built, the strength she'd found in herself, that was the revenge that mattered most. Not destroying Gavin Sterling, though she'd done that too, but rebuilding Elena Mercer into someone who couldn't be destroyed at all.